It started with the kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace. The kind that hums just below the ears, makes you check the locks twice, makes the hairs along your forearms stand up for no reason you can name. I'd been RV camping for over 6 years by then, solo mostly. And if there's one thing I've learned about the American wild, it's this. The land remembers. It doesn't just echo footsteps or carry animal cries across valleys. It remembers. Some places seem to breathe with it. Not in a spiritual sense, more like in the way trauma lingers in an old home long after everyone's moved out. I didn't know that about Mirror Lake. Not until it was too late. It was supposed to be a short trip. Mid-September, just after Labor Day, when the campgrounds clear out, but the weather still holds warmth in the late afternoons. I was heading north through Oregon, skirting the Cascades, when a local I met at a gas station told me about a little lake not far off Highway 26. Remote, scenic, surrounded by thick timber, with a small loop road for RVs and trailers. He said it was quiet. He wasn't wrong. And it was quiet in the way that unnerves you once the sun goes down. The lake didn't show up on my regular RV campground apps, but Google Maps pinned it as Mirror Lake Campground. Just a few gravel pads and a fire ring or two. Free use, first come, first served. No rangers, no fees, no cell signal. I arrived around 4:30 in the afternoon. The gravel road in was narrow, hemmed by fir trees and undergrowth so thick it felt like driving through a tunnel. The trees cast long shadows, and the air took on a damp coolness that made me roll up my windows. When I finally broke through the tree line and saw the water, I'll admit it took my breath. The lake was round, unnaturally so, almost perfectly symmetrical. Still, too. Not a single ripple touched its surface, not even the slightest breeze. My van, a 1994 Volkswagen Eurovan I had rebuilt from the inside out, wheezed slightly as I shifted into park. I stepped out into air that smelled like wet moss and iron. I chose a spot near the east bank where a single picnic table sat a few feet from the water. There were no other campers, no tire tracks, no birdsong, just that heavy kind of silence where even the bugs seemed to hold their breath. I should have left right then, but the sun was dipping low, and I'd driven almost 8 hours that day. Besides, I'd camped solo plenty of times. Silence doesn't scare me. Or at least, it didn't used to. That first night, nothing strange happened. Not exactly. I grilled a simple dinner, sat by the water, and read by lantern light. But something about the lake kept drawing my attention. Every time I looked up from my book, I swore I caught movement, like a figure shifting along the edge of the water. But when I stood and scanned the tree line, there was nothing. No one. The lake, though, it reflected more than it should have. The sky above was empty, but the lake's surface showed wisps of clouds drifting. It mirrored trees that didn't seem to be there when I turned around. And once, I swear this happened, I saw a ripple begin near the center, spreading slowly outward. But when I blinked, the water was flat again, like glass. I didn't sleep well that night. My dreams were filled with crying, not screaming, not moaning, just low, desperate sobbing. I kept waking up thinking I'd left my window cracked, that maybe someone was wandering the woods just out of sight, looking for help. But each time I stepped outside, there was only that same cold stillness. My own breath hung in the air longer than it should have, and the forest, it felt like it was watching me, not the other way around. By the second day, I started to notice things missing. Nothing major, just odd. A lighter I always kept in the van's drawer wasn't there. A bandana I'd hung to dry had vanished. I chalked it up to my own disorganization, but I know myself. I live in this van. I don't misplace things. And then there was the reflection. That afternoon, I was sitting at the edge of the lake, my boots just touching the water. I leaned over to splash my face, and when I looked into the lake, I saw myself. But not quite. My reflection wasn't crying, but its face was wet. Its mouth trembled. Its hands shook slightly. Mine didn't. I blinked, leaned closer. The figure blinked too. But a half second late, like it was lagging behind, trying to keep up. I stumbled backward and fell into the dirt. When I scrambled to my feet and looked again, just water. Clear, still, empty. That night, I locked the van from the inside, pulled the curtains shut, laid in bed with a knife tucked beside the mattress, more for peace of mind than anything, but sleep didn't come. Instead, I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft, spaced out, deliberate, on the side of the van, just beneath the window nearest my head. I held my breath. Nothing. Then again, 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same place, no voices, no footsteps, just the sound of something tapping. Not aggressively, but purposefully. I sat up and held still, listening. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might drown out everything else. I looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. I counted seconds in my head. 10. 20. A minute. Then 3 more knocks, but this time on the other side. I leapt out of bed and yanked open the curtain. Nothing. Just trees. Darkness. A sliver of moon over the lake. And then I realized something that made my stomach turn. There were no footprints. The morning dew was thick on the grass, and even in the moonlight, I could see it clearly, untouched, undisturbed. Not a single dent or smear in the wetness surrounding my van. But something had knocked. 3 times. Twice. I didn't sleep at all after that. Just sat upright, staring out the windshield at the unmoving trees, the unmoving lake. The next morning, I debated packing up and leaving. I should have. But something kept me there. Not fear, not even curiosity. It was like a weight in my chest, like the lake had its hands on me and wouldn't let go. I told myself one more night, just one. I'd document what I saw, try to make sense of it. I didn't know then that the lake didn't want to be understood. It wanted to be remembered. That final morning began heavy, the kind of heaviness you feel in your lungs before you feel it in the air. The sun rose pale behind a curtain of fog, and for the first time in years, I didn't make coffee. I didn't eat. I just sat watching the lake through the van's windshield, feeling like a guest overstaying where I wasn't wanted. The trees didn't move, no breeze, no birds. Even the insects were gone, or silent. I stepped outside with my journal. I needed to write, needed to get this all down like anchoring reality to the page would make the feeling go away. I perched myself on the same picnic table, back to the water, pen scratching the paper as I tried to describe what had happened the night before. I even drew the knocks, 3 dots spaced apart, like it might matter later. And then I heard a splash behind me. Not a small one, not like a fish breaching. This was deep, heavy, like something stepping out of the lake. I turned around so fast I dropped my notebook, but again, nothing. The lake was still. Yet there were wet prints on the shore. I swear it. Bare feet, long and narrow, spaced far apart, like someone had climbed out and stood watching me. But they led nowhere. No drag marks, no footprints into the woods. Just standing there, like the earth had absorbed whoever left them. I gathered my things with trembling hands and made for the van. I told myself this was it. Time to go. No more waiting for logic to catch up, no more trying to rationalize what couldn't be explained. But when I opened the door and climbed in, I saw something that stopped me cold. On my dashboard, sitting neatly folded, was my missing bandana. Still damp, smelling faintly of lake water and something else, a sharp, sterile scent like rust or blood. I hadn't been in the van. No one had the keys but me. I locked it. I know I did. I started the engine anyway, threw the van into reverse. My tires kicked up gravel as I backed out of the sight and turned toward the road. And then I saw them. 2 people, standing just at the edge of the woods across the lake. Not moving, not walking, just standing. One taller, one shorter, maybe a man and a woman, maybe not. Their clothes were pale, almost white. Their faces were blurred by the mist, but even through the trees, I could see something was wrong. Their arms hung too straight, their heads tilted slightly, both in the same direction. I blinked, gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. When I looked again, they were gone. The road out was narrow and winding, and I drove faster than I should have. Branches scraped the side of the van, and more than once I thought I saw movement in the woods beside me, flashes of white between trees like someone keeping pace. I didn't stop until I hit a wide turn and saw a clearing large enough to pull over. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't shut the van off at first. I just sat there, heart hammering, until I could finally breathe again. That's when I checked my phone. No signal. Still. Even out here. But my camera app worked, and something, I don't know what, compelled me to open the gallery. There were new photos. Photos I didn't take. Dozens of them. All from the same angle, from the woods facing my campsite. Some were taken during the day, some at night. One was taken from right outside my window. Me, sleeping. My mouth slightly open, my head turned to the side. Another from behind the van, me walking down to the water. And another from inside, pointing at the back of my head while I wrote in my journal. I dropped the phone, my entire body went cold. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. Who had my phone? Who took those pictures? How did they get inside? And yet, I had the phone. It never left my pocket. The timestamp on the most recent photo was 12 minutes ago. That's when the crying started again. Not in the woods, not in my head. It came from behind the van. Low, wrenching sobs, like someone trying not to be heard but needing to be. I didn't get out. I couldn't. I locked the doors again, even though I'd done it so many times already. And then came the voice. Soft, female, just outside the passenger door. She whispered, "Don't leave me here." The same voice I'd heard in my dreams. "Please, it's still in the lake. It's still watching." I turned my head slow as ice, and through the fogged passenger window I saw her. A face, pale, eyes wide, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, lips trembling, her hand pressed to the glass. Only, it wasn't my reflection. My reflection should have been inside the van, but this woman looked just like me. Older, hollow, crying. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. And then she smiled, but not with her mouth, with her eyes, as if something else had worn her face like a mask. The next thing I knew, I was driving again. Fast. Gravel spraying behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station over 30 miles away. One of those last chance places with a flickering sign and a bathroom key attached to a plank of wood. The clerk gave me a look when I came in. Wide-eyed, dirt-streaked, wild. "You come from Mirror Lake?" he asked. I just nodded. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he sighed and poured me a black coffee without asking. "You're lucky," he said finally. "People who see their reflections cry in that lake usually don't come back whole, if they come back at all." I didn't know how to respond to the man behind the counter. His face was worn like driftwood, leathery and wind-burned, but his eyes weren't cruel. They were sad, knowing. He didn't look at me like I was crazy. He looked at me like he'd seen it too. "Mirror Lake," he muttered again, like the name itself left a bad taste in his mouth. "Locals won't camp there. Haven't in decades." I asked him what he meant. I needed to know that what I saw wasn't just in my head. I needed confirmation that this thing, this watching presence, wasn't a breakdown or some shadow of trauma resurfacing. I needed it to be real, because otherwise I was losing my mind. He didn't answer at first. He just slid the coffee across the counter and nodded toward a dusty corner booth, the kind that creaks when you sit in it. "I'll tell you what I know," he said. "But don't go thinking it'll make it any easier to forget." So I sat. The gas station smelled of motor oil and burnt sugar. There were flies buzzing under the flickering light near the drink cooler. A storm brewed outside, that heavy, electrical kind that sets the back of your teeth on edge. He sat across from me and started slow. Said the lake had always been strange, even before the campground was built, back when it was just logging roads and trap lines. The native tribes that once lived there avoided it, said the water held reflections that didn't belong to the living. They called it the watching place, he told me. Didn't fish it, didn't swim in it, left offerings on the shore instead of crossing, said the lake had a memory, that it remembered you long after you left. He paused then, looked at me hard. "Did you see her?" I didn't answer out loud. I didn't have to. He saw it in my eyes. "The crying girl," he said. "Always the same story. She looks like someone you knew, someone you could love, someone who could have been you. And if you listen too long, she gets in. She wants in. She's not the threat, though. Not really. She's the bait." That's when I started to shake again. My hands couldn't hold the mug steady. He leaned closer. What most folks don't realize, he continued, is the lake doesn't kill you fast. It unthreads you, piece by piece. It finds what you hide. It finds your regrets, your fears, your face. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Like it wasn't poetry. It was process. People vanish, he said, but not in the way you'd expect. Their names get lost, their memories fade from others' minds, like the world edits them out. And when someone does remember, they can't picture their face. They'll swear they never met them at all. It doesn't just consume the person, it scrubs the evidence. It feeds on story, he whispered, not just life. That was the final straw for me. I left the coffee half drunk on the table and thanked him. I said I needed to get back to my van, back on the road, back anywhere but near that place. He didn't stop me, just watched as I left, nodding like he'd seen this scene a dozen times before. The rain hit halfway down the highway, sudden and blinding. My tires skidded once on a patch of oil, and I clenched the wheel so hard my wrists locked. Lightning danced through the trees, and each flash made me see shapes I didn't want to describe. Long limbs, white eyes. That's when I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her again. Not in the road, not in the trees. In the van, in the tiny curtained back window, her face, not crying this time, just staring. I slammed the brakes, swerved into a turnout, jumped out into the rain, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I threw open the side door. No one. Nothing. Not even a wet print on the floor. I don't know how long I stood there, soaked, shivering, flashlight beam bouncing around the interior of the van like a wild animal. But at some point, I realized my reflection in the rearview had changed. When I leaned forward to check, my skin went cold, because it wasn't my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked like me, same eyes, same hair, but her skin was water pale, lips tinged blue, a faint smile that wasn't mine. And her eyes, they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. That's when I heard the whisper again. Not from the outside, not from a voice near the lake, inside my own head. Let me drive now. I backed away, closed the van door, slammed it shut and locked it, even though I knew by now that locks meant nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I drove. 6 hours, through the storm, through pitch black backroads and empty fields and rest stops lit by flickering sodium lamps. I drove until the sun rose again, sharp and sterile through the windshield. Only then did I stop. Only then did I cry. Because I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The photos, the ones I found on my phone, were gone, wiped clean. So were my campsite notes, my journal entries, even the voice recordings I had made on the trip. It was like the story was being erased, like it never wanted me to tell anyone what happened, like it was warning me, or worse, inviting me back. I didn't go back home right away. I found a rest stop outside of Eugene, pulled into a corner space beneath some flickering streetlights, and just sat there for hours, engine off, keys in my lap, watching the condensation roll slowly down the windshield like the lake itself had followed me. There was no reflection now. Not in the windows, not in the mirrors. But that didn't feel like safety. It felt like absence, like she was waiting until I felt safe again before making her presence known, because that's what it wants. Comfort, vulnerability. It waits until you're certain the nightmare's over, and that's when it reminds you it's only just begun. I went through my photos again. Not a single one from the campground remained. But the strangest part, every other picture from months before, they all had reflections in them now. Slight distortions in car mirrors, in lakes, in windows behind me. Barely visible, but they were there. She was in them. Not always clear, but always watching. That night, I sat in the back of the van, knees pulled up to my chest, heart wrapped tight in fear. I tried to remember everything the man at the gas station had told me, tried to piece it together. If it feeds on story, I thought, then maybe forgetting is the only way to kill it. But how do you forget something that lives inside your own image? How do you unsee a reflection that's become you? It wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about the way it followed, the way it grew inside your life, quietly, patiently. And that's when I realized the girl crying in the lake Maybe she wasn't the first. Maybe she was someone else, a traveler like me, someone who stopped for a weekend and never left, someone who stared too long, listened too closely, and became the next bait for the next lost soul who parked their camper too close to the shore. Maybe the lake isn't haunted. Maybe it is the haunting. An engine that runs on memory, regret, grief, a place where your past echoes and morphs and eventually turns on you. And maybe, just maybe, it's not about making you vanish. It's about making you watch from the other side of the glass forever. I should have just driven home then. Left the RV at the edge of Oregon and taken a train, a bike, anything that didn't have mirrors or dark windows. But I didn't. I went back. God help me, I turned around 3 days later and drove back. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe, or closure, or maybe, and this is the part that scares me the most, maybe I just wanted to see her again. The campground was closed when I got there. Heavy chain across the road, a sign saying seasonal maintenance, but the gate was rusted and the bolt cutters I'd brought slid through it like paper. The lake looked the same, still, gray, watching. I stood at the edge with a flashlight in my hand, wind cutting through my jacket like glass. I didn't say anything at first, just waited. And then quietly I said her name. Not because I remembered it, I never knew it, but because in my gut I did. It came out of me like breath, Lena. The water rippled, just once. No sound, no wind, and I saw her. Barely beneath the surface, just under the shallows, floating face up, eyes wide, but it wasn't fear in her expression. It was recognition. She saw me. And for a split second, I saw my own reflection beside her, smiling. Not my body, not my eyes, but my face. Like the lake had started copying me, or preparing to replace me. That's when I understood what the old man meant. It doesn't kill you all at once. It takes you apart, swaps you, grows into you. And I'd already let it in. Every night I spent remembering, every image I stared too long at, every mirror I checked, hoping not to see her. That was the invitation. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled the last photo I had of myself, an old Polaroid taped to my dash, and I dropped it into the lake. Then I whispered, "I won't give you anything else." And I walked away. Didn't run, didn't look back. Because that's how it grabs you, through regret, through fear, through the act of turning around. I drove for days, slept in public places, journaled every moment so I wouldn't forget who I was. Avoided mirrors, avoided still water, avoided silence. Eventually the whispers stopped, the dreams faded, the reflections returned to normal. I don't know if I beat it. Maybe you can't. Maybe all you can do is outrun the story it tries to write for you. But I do know this. If you ever find yourself at a quiet lake deep in Oregon, one that doesn't show the stars at night, one that whispers like wind but there's no breeze, one that seems to remember things you never said out loud, leave right then. Don't camp, don't unpack, don't look in the water, because if you do, it'll look back, and eventually it'll blink. I've been camping in my Volkswagen for a decade now, off-grid, on-grid, anywhere in between. I've chased solitude into the forests of the Pacific Northwest and followed the sun across the Mojave in spring. I've slept beside strangers in crowded BLM lots and under stars so clear they felt close enough to burn. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the park in Arkansas. The name of the place? Sunstone Grove RV Retreat. Sounds pleasant, right? That's what I thought too. I was heading south late in the season, trying to outrun a cold snap rolling through Missouri. Just me in the van. No passengers this time. I liked it that way. No one to worry about but myself and plenty of room to think. But I was tired. Not just physically, I'd been hauling a bad weight in my chest for weeks. Something I couldn't name. There was no plan. Just a map, a few circles I'd drawn back when I thought I knew where I was going, and a general direction. Down. The sign for Sunstone Grove looked newer than the cracked road it leaned beside. A rustic slab of painted wood hanging from rusted chains, swaying in the breeze like it had been waiting for me. Open all year, full hookups, quiet living. It was just off a back road, surrounded by pines so thick I almost missed the turn. No cell signal, but I was too tired to care. The gravel driveway was long and winding, overgrown on both sides. I remember thinking it looked more like someone's private property than a commercial campground. But it was clean. Too clean. Not a scrap of trash, not even pine needles on the drive like it had been swept that morning. Which didn't make sense. I hadn't passed a soul. When I pulled in, I expected a check-in shack or office, but there was just a gate. Wooden. Open. Beyond it, rows of RVs sat in perfect formation. Each one white. Each one identical. Same model, same awnings, same spacing. And each one had the curtains drawn open wide, with people inside. People. Just standing there, smiling. I'm not making that up. In the front windows of every unit, there was a face looking out. Women, kids, all of them still like mannequins, just smiling. I thought it was some weird art thing, maybe a theme park gimmick. I mean, it was creepy, but maybe they were just life-size dolls. Maybe the owners were eccentric. I've seen weirder things on the road. So I told myself, pull in, park, take a nap. If it still feels weird in the morning, you leave. The parking pad I chose was near the back, beside a small grove of trees and a weathered picnic table. There was no host, no registration, nothing. I plugged into the electric hookup, turned off the engine, and tried to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine. I didn't want to look at those RVs again. I pulled the curtains shut, tried to sleep. But that's when it started. The knocking. Soft. Just rhythmic on the side of my van. I thought it was wind at first, branches maybe, but the pattern was too human. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Silence. Silence. I held my breath, counted to 60, waited. Then came the second round. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This time I looked. Nothing. I stepped outside with a flashlight and scanned the woods, the nearby units. Not a soul in sight. Every RV remained still, lit from within, smiling faces pressed to the glass. I could feel them watching me. I should have left right then. Every instinct screamed to go, but I didn't. I got back in the van and locked the doors, told myself it was nothing. At around 2 a.m., I woke to something stranger. Not sound this time, not movement. Smell. It was faint, sweet, almost like decaying fruit. But behind it was something sharper, metallic, like blood left out too long in the heat. I sat up and checked the vents, wondering if I'd parked over something dead. But it wasn't outside. It was in the van. My skin prickled. I opened every cabinet, checked under the seats, even sniffed the upholstery. And then I saw it. A handprint. Pressed on the inside of my rear window, palm up, fingers long. The smudge was faint, but it was inside. I hadn't opened that window. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the driver's seat until morning, gripping my steering wheel like it was a lifeline. By sunrise, the smell had vanished. The handprint was gone. I convinced myself it was all in my head. Road fatigue, loneliness, maybe even a fever. I'd been pushing too hard. I needed food, maybe a walk, just something to reset. So I stepped out, took in the daylight. It was quiet. Too quiet. I noticed something then. Every RV, every one of those identical units was still occupied, but now the people inside weren't at the windows. They were sitting at their tables, each one in the exact same position, facing forward, perfect posture, hands folded, no one was moving. There must have been at least 40 rigs, and not a single person stirred. I tried calling out. Hello? Nothing. I approached one of them, slow, careful. I figured maybe there was a gas leak. Maybe they were unconscious. Maybe it was some kind of cult. But as I got closer, I realized the man inside was breathing. Barely. So shallow it was almost imperceptible. But he was breathing. He didn't blink, didn't look at me, didn't move. I banged on the side of the rig. Still nothing. And that's when I noticed the second thing. His eyes were bleeding. Just a thin trail from the corners, like tears, but dark and dried. I stumbled back. My gut turned to ice. That's when I decided to leave, but the van wouldn't start. Battery? No, it had been plugged in. Maybe a fuse? I checked everything I could. I'm not a mechanic, but I know enough to get myself out of most messes. Nothing worked. The engine didn't even try. Just silence. Then I saw something in the side mirror. A child, standing 10 feet away. He was maybe 7, pale, wearing pajamas, no shoes, and he was smiling, not like a normal smile. This one was wide, too wide. Mouth slightly parted, teeth small and perfect like polished stones. I turned to face him directly, but he was gone. No footprints, no movement, nothing but the pine needles and gravel. Something was very wrong with this place, and I was trapped. I didn't breathe. Not fully, not in the way you do when you're safe. I stood there, my hand still clutching the door handle of the van, waiting for something, anything to break the silence. But the air was still, not just quiet, dead. No wind, no bird song, no rustling from the woods, just the sound of my own breath, sharp and fast in my ears. I walked a few paces toward where the child had been. Nothing, not even a scuff in the gravel. The pine needles were untouched, the dust undisturbed, like he'd never been there at all. That was when I noticed the clock on the front of the nearest RV. It was one of those big round ones you see in schools. Plain, red secondhand ticking backward. I stared at it for a full minute. It wasn't a glitch. It was running in reverse. Something inside me broke, not like a loud snap, more like a seam opening, the stitching of my thoughts coming undone. I backed away, turned toward my van, and decided I needed help. Real help. Even if I had to hike 10 miles out. I'd grab my pack, hike to the nearest road, flag someone down. But when I got back to the van, it wasn't my van anymore. Same model, sure, same color, same stickers on the bumper, but the inside, everything had changed. My sleeping bag was neatly folded on the back bench. The little cactus I kept by the dash was gone. And worse, there were photos taped to the cabinets. Photos I didn't take, of me. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at one image of myself asleep, head tilted back, mouth half open, hoodie bunched at the neck. The timestamp at the bottom read 2:47 a.m. I didn't own a camera with a timestamp. I didn't own any of these pictures, and in every single one behind me, sometimes in the mirror, sometimes through the window, was a figure, watching, sometimes in shadow, sometimes in reflection, always smiling. I ran. I didn't grab anything, didn't lock the door. I just ran down the gravel lane, past the rows of lifeless RVs, past the hollow picnic area and the rusted swing set that still swayed slightly even though there was no wind. I was maybe half a mile in when I found the gate closed. No, not just closed, gone. The entire wooden arch, the chains, the signage, gone. The road now led nowhere, just thick trees growing too close together to be natural, like a wall. I stopped, tried to orient myself. There'd been a curve in the drive on the way in, a distinct bend where the trees gave way to an open view of the valley. But now, just a straight, impossible tunnel of green and silence. My head spun. I pulled out my phone, still no signal. But the screen was lit, and a new image had appeared in my gallery. A photo of me, standing at the exact spot where I was now, taken from behind. I dropped the phone, let it crack open on the gravel. That was when I heard it. A laugh. Soft, childlike, but distant, echoing in the wrong direction like it was bouncing off trees that weren't there. I turned slowly, not even sure what I expected to see anymore. And then I saw her, a woman, standing 2 RVs down from mine, pale, barefoot. Her nightgown hung loose like it had never seen daylight, and her eyes, God, her eyes. They weren't just empty. They were wide open. Unblinking. And behind the smile, something pulsed beneath the skin of her face, like the bones weren't set right, like the shape of her wasn't finished. She didn't move. She didn't need to. I walked backward, not daring to turn my back to her, and then the door behind her opened. Another figure stepped out, then another, and another. One by one, they emerged from the RVs, not running, not shouting, just stepping into the daylight, all smiling, all watching. I counted at least 20 before I finally ran. Through the trees this time, off the trail. Twisting branches clawed at my face, tore at my jacket, but I didn't stop. I pushed through underbrush, slipped in mud, kept going until I couldn't hear my own feet anymore. When I stopped, heart hammering like a jackhammer in my chest, I was at the edge of a clearing. In the center of it stood a van. My van. At least I thought it was. Until I got closer. It was an exact replica. Every dent, every sticker, every scratch, down to the slight rust spot under the rear bumper. but it was covered in vines. Vines that had grown through the wheels, across the windshield, over the roof, the kind of growth that takes years. And inside, there were bones, still clothed, my clothes, a hoodie, boots, sunglasses hanging from the collar like I always wore them. I staggered backward and fell hard, the breath knocked out of me. I couldn't think, couldn't even scream. I just stared at the bones inside that van, sitting just like I had the night before. Head back, mouth open, dead. No, 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 no. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I got up and ran again. Branches slapped me. Thorns caught my skin. Blood slicked down my arms and neck. But I didn't feel it. I ran until the forest opened again, until I stumbled, knees giving out, into the clearing behind my original campsite. And the RVs, they were gone. All of them. The pads were empty. Picnic tables overturned. Trash scattered, half buried in soil. No figures in the windows. No smiling faces, just quiet, real quiet, not dead silence. I could hear birds again, wind, the hum of insects. It was like I'd stepped out of a nightmare. I turned. My van, my real van, was parked exactly where I left it. Same color, same condition, cactus on the dash. I threw open the door. The photos were gone. No handprint. I turned the key, not expecting anything. It started. Just like that, the engine turned over smooth and easy, like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't question it. I backed out, turned around, and drove that gravel road like it was a lifeline. This time, the gate was there. The old wooden sign creaked as I passed beneath it, the chains rattling in the wind. Only now, the sign didn't say Sunstone Grove. It said, "No vacancy. You left once, don't come back." I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. I kept driving until the trees gave way to the highway, and the highway gave way to towns with gas stations and noise and people who blinked and moved when you waved at them. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be away from there. Far enough that it felt like I could finally breathe again. By the time I reached a small diner outside Flagstaff, the sun had already begun its descent behind the red Arizona cliffs. I pulled in, shaking, dirty, blood dried on my arms, dust in my hair. I must have looked like I'd crawled out of the woods, feral and half-crazed. But the woman behind the counter didn't flinch. She just poured me coffee, slid it toward me without a word, and left me to sit in my silence. And I did. I just sat there, listening to the clink of forks on plates, the faint scratch of a radio playing old country songs. The world felt real again. Safe even, in that soft, unremarkable way that you only recognize once you've been somewhere that isn't. I stared into the coffee until it went cold. I kept asking myself what happened, where I'd gone, if it was a break in reality or a trick of the brain. I'm not religious, and I've never been one to believe in ghosts or alternate timelines, but I've also never had a memory fracture that vivid, that precise. I hadn't hallucinated. My boots were still muddy with earth that didn't match the landscape outside. My neck still stung with scratches that hadn't been there before I ran. I didn't dream it. And then came the man who sat down at the booth across from me. He was old, mid-70s maybe, wearing a plaid shirt and jeans that had seen their share of dust. He had a trucker's tan, hands like someone who worked with engines, and a face that had forgotten how to smile. He didn't ask if he could sit. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, "You came from Sunstone, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He nodded slowly, like he already knew. "They change the sign every few years," he said. "Make it sound sweet. Sometimes it's Birch Hollow. Other times it's Honeybend. Pretty names. Names that make you feel safe." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, and slid a photo across the table. It was old, yellowed around the edges. A family standing in front of a brown and orange RV from the 70s. A boy in the center, smiling. I stared at the photo. I knew that smile, the same one from the window. That face hadn't changed. 1979, he said. I was 12. Parents went camping. Only I came back. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He looked down at the coffee between us like it hurt him to remember. They thought I was lying, said I'd wandered off, that I imagined things. Even I started to believe that after a while, until it happened again. He looked up, eyes sharp now. That place isn't just haunted, it feeds. On time, on memory, on who you think you are. I whispered, "Why does it let some people go?" He shrugged. "Maybe because you didn't break the rules. Maybe because something else called dibs. Or maybe it's just not finished with you yet." I didn't sleep that night. I drove until I couldn't keep my eyes open, then parked at a rest stop with bright lights and big trucks and people moving around. I kept the engine running. I locked every door, and still I didn't sleep. For days, I couldn't get the images out of my head, the smiling faces, the ticking clock, the duplicate van with bones inside, the sign that changed, and worst of all, the thought that maybe I hadn't really left. Maybe this world now, this version of reality, wasn't the one I started in. Maybe I died back there. Maybe I'm still dying in some other timeline, and this life is just a memory loop unraveling. I know how that sounds. I do. But here's what happened a week later. I was back in New Mexico, staying at a KOA near Taos, trying to pretend that things were normal. I'd spent the day hiking, breathing fresh air, trying to stitch myself back together with routine. That night, I made a campfire, cooked up some soup on the little stove, and sat outside under the stars with a notebook, writing everything I could remember from that place. And then my radio turned on, by itself. I hadn't touched it, just this faint burst of static, then music. Something soft from the 1950s, crackling like it was playing from another era. I reached over to switch it off, and paused. There was a voice behind the music, barely audible. But I swear, it whispered my name. 3 times. I ripped the radio off the table and hurled it into the dark. The static didn't stop until it hit the dirt. I packed that night. Didn't care if it was 1 a.m. or how tired I was. I drove. Since then, I've stayed off the smaller campgrounds. I avoid state parks I don't recognize. I keep to well-lit places with noise and people and exits you can see from your windshield. But even now, sometimes I wake up in the van and feel like something's wrong. I check the windows, and every so often, I see a face reflected that doesn't match the world around me. Not angry, not sad, just smiling, like it's waiting, because maybe it is. Maybe it let me go, not out of mercy, but to spread its name, to carry it forward like a seed waiting to sprout. Maybe someone else has to enter before I'm finally free. So if you ever find yourself on a long stretch of road, out in the woods, and you see a weathered old gate with a name you don't recognize, but it sounds soft, inviting, like a promise of peace, don't stop. Don't turn in, don't smile back, because once you enter the silent RV park, you leave a part of yourself behind. And if you're lucky, that's all you leave. They say the desert doesn't forget, that it holds on to whatever dies out there, like the sand itself has memory. I never believed in that kind of talk, not until I took a wrong turn down an old road that doesn't show up on any GPS. Route 666, they've renamed it since, tried to bury the history under asphalt and mile markers. But if you find it by accident, if you're unlucky enough to follow its faded signs, then you'll understand why people call it the Devil's Highway. My name's Travis, I'm 42, and for the past year I've been living full-time in my Volkswagen Westfalia, a 91 van with more rust than paint, but she's carried me through every terrain this country has to offer. Forests thick with fog, back roads slick with mud, mountain passes no wider than a shopping cart. I've always preferred the remote campgrounds, the places you have to work a little to get to. You trade convenience for peace, crowds for silence. That silence used to calm me. I used to crave it. Until New Mexico. It was early spring, late March, and I was winding my way across the southern part of the state, planning to hit Pie Town and then head north toward the El Malpais lava fields. I just left a small RV park outside of Lordsburg. Nothing fancy, just gravel lots and a chain-link fence, and I wanted to camp wild for a few days. So I veered off the highway to follow some BLM roads. That's when I saw it. A crooked old sign half buried in sand, the lettering so worn it looked like it'd been scraped by wind for decades. It only said, Route 666, East. My heart beat a little faster, not out of fear, but curiosity. I'd heard the old stories. People disappearing, cars found abandoned with the engines still running, old Navajo tales about shadows that ride the wind, things that can only follow if you call them by name. I told myself it was nonsense. I turned onto the road. The asphalt changed quickly, cracked and sun-bleached, the paint lines barely visible. No traffic, no fences, no cattle crossings, just desert stretching out forever. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the faint rattle of my camping gear in the back. I had enough fuel, plenty of food, and a map that didn't list this route at all. About 40 minutes in, I passed the remains of a town. No name, no people. Just the skeletons of buildings, sun-bleached signs in Spanish and English, a church without a roof. The windows stared at me like empty eyes. I didn't stop. Another hour passed. The road grew worse, but still paved. The sun was setting behind me, casting long shadows that stretched across the sand like fingers. I decided to pull off near a cluster of low boulders and set up camp just off the road. No cell service, no sounds, no lights, just the wind howling across the basin. That night, something woke me. It wasn't a noise exactly. It was more like a pressure, the kind that makes your ears ring before a storm. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked out the van's back window. Headlights. Far down the road. Still, not moving. It was strange. The lights didn't seem to flicker or bounce like someone driving. They were just there. Too far for me to hear an engine. I watched them for a few minutes, expecting them to move or vanish, but they didn't. They just stayed there, pointed straight at my van like a spotlight, like they were watching me. I told myself it had to be another camper, someone else exploring the back roads like I was. Maybe they saw my rig and decided to keep their distance. I pulled the curtains shut and tried to sleep. By morning, the lights were gone. No tire tracks on the road. No vehicle in sight. I felt uneasy, but I told myself it was probably a dream. Or maybe I imagined it in the dark. Light can play tricks out here. But when I got behind the wheel to keep driving, I noticed something odd. The odometer read 7 miles more than it should have. I know my van. I know exactly how much ground I covered before I stopped, and there's no way it moved on its own. I checked the handbrake, still engaged. I looked for tire marks in the sand. Nothing. Just the ones I made when I parked. That's when I started to feel like I wasn't alone. By mid-morning, the heat was already rising. The desert shimmered around me, mirage waves in the distance. I drove east, following the broken road, hoping it would spit me out near a main highway soon. I didn't see another vehicle all day, not one. But just before sunset, I checked my rearview mirror and saw it. Another RV, maybe 30 yards back, same size as mine, but older, like something from the 70s. Rounded edges, metallic stripes, front windshield darkened like an old photo. It wasn't there a minute ago. I didn't hear it approach. No dust trail, just there. I slowed down, pulled to the side, and waved. Maybe they were lost too. No response. The RV slowed to match my speed, but didn't stop. I turned off the ignition and stepped outside. The desert air hit me like a furnace. I waved again. Still nothing. No sound. No movement. Then I realized something that made my stomach tighten. There was no one in the driver's seat. I blinked. Looked again. The windshield was dark, but the sun hit it just right, and I could see clearly. The seat was empty. No hands on the wheel. No outline of a driver. I stepped back toward my van, every hair on my arm standing up. I got inside and locked the doors. Turned the ignition, but my engine stalled. Once, twice. The third time it turned over, coughing like it was choking on dust. I floored it. The mirror showed the RV falling behind, slowly but not stopping, not turning around, just continuing. Like it was tethered to me somehow, bound by some invisible thread. I drove until the road disappeared entirely. Just sand and rock now, no sign of maintenance. I found a washout trail and followed it into the hills, far enough I thought maybe I'd lost it. I set up camp in a dry arroyo, surrounded by high walls of stone. I didn't light a fire, didn't cook dinner, just sat inside the van, windows cracked, listening. That night I heard footsteps. Not animal steps, human. Soft and deliberate, crunching through gravel and dry brush. They circled the van once, Then again, I held my breath so long I nearly passed out. I didn't look, because I knew if I looked, I'd see someone or something standing there, and I wasn't ready to see what face it wore. By dawn, the silence was crushing, the kind that doesn't just sit around you, it sinks into your bones. I hadn't slept. I didn't even try. My hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel all night. My back ached. My thoughts moved like mud. But I didn't hear the footsteps again. And when I finally found the nerve to pull back the curtain, the world looked the same. Pale morning light, no tracks in the dirt, no sign of the driverless RV, just emptiness. Like the night had swallowed whatever came looking for me and left no evidence behind. I knew I had to get out. I poured half a bottle of water over my face and packed up without breakfast. My hands shook the entire time. My instincts told me to leave the area completely, to turn back and find the last real road I'd seen. But the terrain behind me was bad. The road had vanished miles back, and I didn't know if my rig could handle another detour through loose sand, so I pushed forward, watching the sun rise higher over the cracked horizon. It was around noon when I saw the carcass. A coyote, maybe, or something bigger. It was shredded beyond recognition, but not by a predator. Not any I knew. No gnawing, no feeding, just torn apart and left in a spiral of blood and fur. The strangest part was the trail that led to it. Tire tracks, RV-sized, deep ones, like something heavy had passed over the same spot again and again. I stopped beside it, got out. The tracks led forward, east, the same direction I was headed. I followed them on foot for a few dozen yards. They vanished over a ridge, but before I turned back, I noticed something else. In the sand beside the tracks were boot prints. Barely there, as if someone walked alongside the moving RV, one step after the next, pacing it. The prints were all facing forward, none came back. By the time I got back to my van, my hands were trembling again. I wanted to believe it was just a scavenger, maybe another traveler in an old rig with engine trouble. Maybe he was pacing while the vehicle idled. Maybe he couldn't afford to stop. That's what I told myself. But then I noticed something new. My rear window, the left one, just above the bed, had a smudge on the glass, an oily handprint, fingers spread wide. I hadn't seen it that morning. I drove until sundown without stopping. The terrain grew stranger, more surreal, like the desert was losing interest in pretending to be normal. The sky darkened too fast, like twilight had arrived hours too early. The sand shifted color, from pale yellow to a kind of ash gray. My headlights seemed dimmer than usual. Then I saw it again. Up ahead. The RV. It was parked off the road in the shadow of a lone hill, half covered by thorny brush. Same silver body, same dark windshield. But now I could see more of it. The license plate was blank. Not scratched out, not stolen, just smooth metal, no numbers, no state. That broke something small and logical inside me. I couldn't explain it, but it made my blood run cold. That plate should have had something, anything, to tie it to reality. Instead, it was a perfect blank. I didn't stop. I drove past it, eyes fixed on the road, heart pounding like war drums. And as I passed, I thought I saw movement, not inside, underneath. A shape. Long-limbed, low to the ground, slithering, like a shadow that detached itself and forgot it wasn't supposed to move like that. I didn't sleep that night either. I parked between two giant boulders, wedging the van into a narrow gap where nothing bigger than a rabbit could follow. I faced the nose toward a rocky slope, so nothing could come at me head-on without making noise. I kept the engine ready. I held my keys in one hand the entire night, and still I heard it. The same footsteps, circling, slow and deliberate. But this time, they stopped, right by my door. The handle creaked, not loudly, just a whisper of metal, like it was testing the lock. I didn't move, I didn't even blink. I stared at the door, breathing through my nose, my muscles locked in place. My ears picked up everything, the ticking of the engine cooling, the wind pushing against the rocks, my own pulse in my head. Then a sound I still can't describe. Not quite a knock, more like a scrape. Nails? Bone? It dragged slowly across the van wall, starting at the back and crawling forward like something tracing the shape of the vehicle with infinite patience. I whispered to myself, not words, just noise, like a chant, just to keep from screaming. And then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. Dawn took too long to come. When I finally cracked open the side door, I saw it, clear as anything. On the ground, written in the dust, were 4 words. I follow the forgotten. That was it. No footprints, no RV, no engine sounds, just the message and the empty sky above. Something inside me broke open then, not out of fear but realization. I'd called something when I turned down that road, not with words, with curiosity, with my silence, my solitude, my refusal to turn back when the signs all told me to. I drove all day, no food, just water and white knuckles. That evening, I saw a ranger station marked on an old paper map I had shoved in the glove box. It wasn't far, a few dozen miles northeast. I followed dirt roads barely wide enough for the van, praying with every turn that I'd find someone. A radio tower, a fence, a voice. I got there just before sunset. The station was boarded up, abandoned. Graffiti on the walls, windows cracked. Inside, dust covered every surface like skin. A map on the wall had Route 666 crossed out in red marker, a bit circled again and again with the word no written across it. I slept inside, door barricaded with old furniture. That night, for the first time in days, I didn't hear footsteps, but I dreamed of an RV and a shadow riding shotgun. I woke up on the floor of that ranger station with blood in my mouth. Not a lot. Just a thin line trailing from the corner of my lip to my chin. Dried. I hadn't bitten my tongue. I checked. I didn't feel hurt, but I didn't feel right either. My head throbbed in a dull, steady rhythm, like something deep inside my skull had been pounding all night. And my hands were filthy. Not dirt, grease. Thick black streaks up to my elbows, the kind you get from crawling through an engine. I looked out the boarded window, and that's when I saw it. My van had been moved. Not far, just a few feet to the right. But I hadn't parked it like that. There were no tire marks showing a turn, no sign of anything being pushed or dragged, just a new position, like someone had picked it up and gently set it down again. Or worse, like it had rolled itself over a few feet in the night and stopped. I backed away from the window. A thought slipped into my brain, uninvited and unwelcome. Maybe I wasn't alone in the van last night. That morning, I didn't drive. I walked. I needed to know where I was. Not just on a map, I needed to feel the land, to ground myself in something real again. So I hiked for hours across dry, open brush. I followed the line of the hills, searching for signs of anything. A town, a road, a person. And I found something. Just before dusk, tucked in a narrow canyon, I saw it. The same RV, parked on top of a narrow ridge, almost like it was waiting for me to look up and see it. But this time the door was open. Not wide, just cracked, and someone or something stood just inside, not moving, not watching me, just there. A shadow behind the threshold, limbs just slightly too long, like someone had assembled a person from memory and got the proportions wrong. I froze. That kind of fear doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, in layers, like realizing you've been bleeding for a while and only now feel faint. My mouth went dry. My legs stiffened. I stood there, eyes locked on that door, on that impossible silhouette, and then it took a step back, vanished inside. The door slowly closed. I didn't wait to see what came next. I ran back to the station as the sun dipped under the edge of the hills, and when I got there, I threw open the van door, ready to drive, anywhere. Just get out. But something had changed. The front seats, my driver's seat, and the passenger side were gone. Not stolen, not ripped out, just missing. No bolts, no torn fabric, just smooth, empty metal floor like they had never been there. And in their place were 2 identical chairs, old, moldy, bolted to the floor in exactly the same spots, like they had always belonged there. And sitting in one of them, a photo, faded, yellowed, curled at the edges. It showed a man standing beside a van that looked like mine, but older, more worn. The man wasn't smiling, he wasn't even facing the camera, just standing at the edge of the frame, one hand resting on the van's side, the other hanging limp at his side. His eyes were blacked out, not shadowed, scribbled through. Ink, maybe, or soot. On the back, written in shaky block letters, it said, He left the road. I followed. That broke me. I screamed. I tore the photo in half, then into quarters, then into confetti, but my hands were shaking too hard. My knees buckled and I collapsed right there on the floor of the van, sobbing into the seat that wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't know who the man was, but some part of me recognized him. I slept inside the ranger station again, this time with the photo pieces buried under a pile of rocks outside, as if that would stop them from coming back. It didn't work. At 3:07 a.m., I heard the engine outside. Low, rumbling, steady. I looked through the broken blinds. The RV was idling just 20 feet away, headlights off, windows black. The driver's side door hung open, and in the reflection of the passenger side mirror, I saw my own face. But I wasn't in it. I wasn't there. Just my reflection, staring back at me, not blinking. I shut the blinds. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, the RV was gone. But something had changed inside me. I couldn't remember how long I'd been out there. The date on my watch didn't make sense. My phone, now completely dead, said it was July 12th, but the map I'd checked back in Tucson said July 4th. 8 days had passed. But I'd only slept, 3 nights? I couldn't trust time anymore. I couldn't trust my van, but I had no choice. I got behind the wheel, and the engine started on the first turn, even though I'd drained the battery running the fan the night before. As I pulled away from the station, I caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. The window of the ranger station was no longer broken. Instead, it had a face pressed against the glass, and it looked exactly like mine. The road didn't feel real anymore. It twisted in ways that made no sense, looping where it should have straightened, climbing when the map told me it should descend. I turned off my GPS. It hadn't worked since the first night. Instead, I followed instinct, or maybe desperation, I don't know. But the further I drove, the more the world seemed to shift. The colors of the desert dulled. What had once been rich reds and golds turned to shades of ash and rust. The sky sagged like it had forgotten how to hold itself up. The wind picked up dust that didn't fall, and then I noticed it. A shape in the rearview mirror. The RV. Not close, not far. Just there. No lights, no sound, no dust trail. It was like it was part of the scenery until you realized it wasn't supposed to be. I pulled over, waited, watched. The RV didn't move. It just sat in the road behind me, maybe 100 yards back. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there. I got out, walked toward it slowly, gravel crunching under my boots. 10 steps in, a cold gust swept through the desert. Not the dry, sun-baked breeze I'd felt all trip. This one was sharp, damp, like it had crawled up out of a hole in the ground. And when I looked again, the RV was gone. Not a sound, not a whisper of an engine, no tracks, just empty road stretching behind me like it always had. I turned around, and that's when I saw it in front of me. Parked on the side of the road, maybe 20 feet ahead, facing me now. My chest went tight. I staggered backward. The gravel slid under my boots. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I knew what it was now. That wasn't just an RV. It was mine. A second one. An exact copy. Same make, same model, same broken rearview mirror and faded Route 66 bumper sticker. The only difference? The windows were blacked out. All of them. Covered with something from the inside. Thick and matte like soot or tar. And the door opened. Slowly, creaking, as if inviting me in. I ran. Not back to my van, not toward the copy. I bolted into the desert, off the road, through a dry wash, across thorn brush that tore at my legs. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs gave out beneath me. I lay in the dust, hidden under a clump of mesquite trees, shaking, listening. Silence. Not even birds. Eventually, the wind returned. I crept back toward the road. Both vans were gone. I don't remember getting back to the driver's seat. I don't remember turning the key. All I remember is the sound of the tires on pavement and the sudden, desperate urge to get anywhere with people. It was nearly dark when I saw the town. No name, just a faded green highway sign bent at the edge of the off-ramp. The letters were scraped off by wind or time or something worse. But it had lights. I saw a gas station, an old motel, A diner with a glowing open sign buzzing against the last of the sunset. Civilization. I almost cried. I pulled into the gas station first. The attendant looked at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. He didn't say anything, just nodded once when I asked if they had fuel. I filled up, then I parked the van and went into the diner. It was almost empty. A middle-aged waitress in a torn pink uniform greeted me with a tired smile. She handed me a menu, but I didn't read it. "I'll take anything hot," I said. She nodded. "Coffee?" "God, yes." While I waited, I checked my reflection in the window beside me. That's when I saw it again. Across the road, half hidden in the shadow of an old billboard. The RV. My RV. Parked, quiet, facing the diner. But I was in my van. So whose was that? The waitress returned, saw my face, followed my gaze. Her hand trembled as she set down the coffee. "You came down Route 666, didn't you?" She asked softly. I didn't answer. She nodded anyway. "They don't put it on maps anymore," she said. "Change the signs, rename the route numbers. Doesn't matter. Road remembers." She looked me dead in the eye. "Once you've seen it, it follows, and it wants something." "What does it want?" I whispered. The lights in the diner flickered. She didn't respond. Instead, she handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn map. A crooked path through the desert, winding past rock formations and dry riverbeds. No town names, just landmarks. A single red X marked the end of the route. "Drive this road," she said. "No matter what you see, don't stop. Don't turn around, not even if you hear someone you love calling your name." I stared at her. "What happens if I don't?" She didn't answer, but I saw her eyes well up, and then she walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God knows I tried. I even parked in the motel lot, locked all the doors, pulled the shades down tight, but my body wouldn't let go. My heart thumped in a broken rhythm, my brain repeating the waitress's words like a prayer I didn't understand. Once you've seen it, it follows. By 3 a.m, I gave up. I unfolded the paper again under the dome light. That red X burned into me. Every part of me screamed not to go. But the idea of staying, of waking up and seeing that second RV parked a few feet away from mine, was worse. I turned the key. The van started with a wheeze. Headlights cut into the dark like a pair of dull knives. The road she'd drawn wasn't on my GPS, wasn't on any map I had. But as I passed the diner, I saw her inside, standing by the window, watching me. She didn't wave, just nodded once, as if to say, "Go." So I went, back onto the highway, then onto a dirt road that veered off near an abandoned water tower, the kind you only find when you're not looking for anything. I followed that road for hours. There were no signs, just the occasional ruin of a structure too stubborn to collapse, an old corral, a toppled windmill, a rusted truck that had clearly been there since the 70s. And then the strange things began. First, it was the sound, a low rumble, like thunder, but constant. It came from behind, from far off, just under the edge of my hearing. I kept checking the mirrors, but the dust behind me remained still. Then came the smell, something acrid, burned oil and metal, like a junkyard on fire. It seeped into the vents, clung to my clothes, coated my tongue, and finally, the heat. The sun hadn't even risen yet, but my skin began to itch, like something under the surface was crawling. The windshield fogged, even though the air was dry. I rolled the windows down, only for a gust of air, hot, thick, full of static, to slam against my face. I was being warned, or tested. But I didn't stop. Eventually I hit a ridge where the land dipped down like a bowl. From the crest, I saw something that made me slam the brakes so hard I nearly bit my tongue. There, in the valley below, were 3 RVs, all identical to mine. Same make, same model, same exact dents, same sticker on the bumper. They were parked in a triangle facing inward, like some kind of ritual. And in the center, a fire, not flames, just light. Pale, bluish-white, like lightning caught in a jar. It didn't flicker, it pulsed. I killed the engine, waited, watched. Nothing moved. But I could feel it, the pressure in my ears, the metallic taste in my mouth. My hands trembled on the wheel. Then the voice came. Not outside. Inside. A whisper so clear it was as if someone was sitting in the passenger seat beside me. "You brought it this far. "Now finish it!" I screamed. I turned in my seat. No one there. The van was empty. Still, the whisper clung to the air like humidity, pressing against my neck. Finish what? I didn't know. But I knew I had to move. I started the van again, descended into the bowl. The three RVs remained still, their windows black and silent. As I got closer, my van began to sputter. The wheel locked for a moment. Lights flickered. It was like the machine itself didn't want to go any further. And yet I rolled on, right into the center of that triangle, stopping just before the flickering light. The moment I did, every electronic in the van shut off. Dashboard, headlights, phone, silence. Only the pulsing glow remained, casting long shadows of the other vans onto the dust like they were reaching for me. I got out. I stepped into the circle, and I understood. These weren't just copies, they were echoes, reflections of me, of others, people who'd driven this same path, faced the same fear, and maybe, just maybe, stopped when they shouldn't have. Each van was a dead memory, a reminder, a soul trapped on the highway of its own making, and now I was next. Unless I did what the whisper wanted, unless I finished it. I reached out toward the light, and the moment my fingers brushed it, everything changed. The world flipped. No sound, no color. Just cold, like I'd fallen into a void. I couldn't see my van, couldn't see the desert, just static, endless flickering static, like an old TV turned to a dead channel. And in that noise, I saw them. People, faces pressed against glass, eyes wide, hands slapping windows. My windows. They were in the other vans, trapped, endlessly reliving the moment they didn't run, the second they turned around, the mistake they didn't know they'd made until it was too late. I screamed. Tried to run, but there was no road anymore. Just the voice again. You can stay or you can drive, but you must choose. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth worked, but no sound came out. The static closed in around me, like wind made of broken glass, scraping at my skin, humming with some kind of intelligence. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was trying to say something. I turned toward the glowing core, the white-blue pulse at the center of the triangle. My RV was still there, its silhouette distorted by the haze, but the door was open now, wide open. Something was waiting inside. Not someone. Something. And the voice, the whisper that had dragged me this far, sharpened like a knife behind the words. Choose. 1,000 thoughts swarmed through me. I thought of the woman at the diner, of the mechanic who went silent, of the first time I saw that second RV on the roadside, of the fear that built inch by inch until it became a living thing inside me. And I knew what it wanted, what this place was. This was the point where people disappeared, where you either faced what followed you or you became it. I stepped toward my RV, one slow foot after another. With each step, the static hiss grew louder. Not angry, but hungry. Like it wanted me to turn around. Like it fed on doubt. Inside the RV, everything looked the same. My jacket on the seat, my keys in the cup holder, my half-eaten sandwich on the counter. But it all felt wrong, staged, too still, like a diorama of a life, not the life itself. I touched the driver's seat. It was ice cold. I sat down, gripped the wheel, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw myself, through the windshield, standing outside, looking back in, two versions of me, one inside, one out, one who fled, one who faced it. Then, like a film reel catching fire, everything warped. The static blew out into a scream, and suddenly, I was driving down Route 6666. Only this time, the sky was pitch black and the moon was red. My headlights worked again, but they only showed shadows darting across the road, shapes that didn't walk right, that jerked like broken marionettes. And behind me, through the rearview mirror, I saw it. The other RV. Close. Closer than ever. Its lights were on, but no one sat in the driver's seat. It moved with unnatural precision, never swerving, never slowing. Just gliding across the broken asphalt like it weighed nothing. I slammed the gas. 80, 90, 100. Still behind me, I took curves too hard, hit potholes so deep I nearly lost the wheels. But that thing never fell back, never lost traction. It was chained to me. Then the road began to change. The lines faded, the trees leaned inward, and the desert sand began to shimmer like water, like it was only pretending to be real. Then, crack! The windshield split, not from a rock, not from pressure, but from a hand. Pale, with fingers too long, too thin, pressed against the inside of the glass. I swerved, screamed. The RV nearly flipped. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because something in me knew if I stopped even for a second, I would never start again. That's how it took people. Not with claws or violence, with fear, with stillness, with the idea that running was useless. I drove until the world itself began to unravel, until the road disappeared entirely. Until all that was left was the roar of the engine, the thrum of my heartbeat, and that impossible shadow behind me. Then I saw it. The sign. Weather-beaten, half collapsed. Now leaving Route 666, have a blessed journey. I passed it at full speed, and like a bubble bursting, the pressure broke. The static was gone. The engine sputtered back to normal. The mirror showed nothing. Just an empty road behind me. Just a wide, open desert in every direction. I pulled over, shaking, crying, alive. I stepped outside and fell to my knees in the dirt. The silence was real this time, and the sun was rising, bright, warm, normal. No light pulsed from the ground. No identical vans waited in the shadows. I was alone, but not the kind of alone that eats you, the kind that saves you. I sat there for a long time, just letting the silence fill me, letting the warmth of the desert morning sink into my skin as if it could burn away everything that came before. The sand shimmered in the dawn light, and for once, it wasn't a trick of the mind. It was just sun on stone, wind on gravel, the earth doing what it had always done long before I came along and tried to outrun something I didn't understand. Eventually, I climbed back into the RV. Not the other one, not the copy, mine. I knew that now, not just from the way the seat hugged my weight or the way my backpack was still slumped against the door, but from something deeper, something I couldn't name, something that told me I had made it back. But I wasn't the same. When I looked in the mirror, my face was thinner, my eyes a little darker, like I'd looked too long into something that didn't want to be seen and brought some of it back with me. The drive into Albuquerque felt like re-entering the world after years underwater. The colors were brighter. The traffic noise didn't irritate me the way it used to. I watched people laugh at coffee shops, jog across crosswalks, honk at each other in rush hour, and I wondered if any of them had ever come close to being erased, if any of them knew how thin the veil really was out there. I parked the RV at a rest stop just outside the city and sat with a bottle of warm water for a while. I thought about calling someone, my brother, a friend. But what would I even say? Hey, you ever been chased by a driverless RV through a highway that may or may not exist in this reality? No. Some stories weren't meant to be shared casually. Some roads weren't meant to be traveled twice. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document, and I started writing. Not just to make sense of what happened, but because I needed to remember. That was the most terrifying part of it all. Not the hand in the windshield, not the other me staring through the glass, not even the voice whispering from the storm. It was the idea that I might forget. That something like that could happen to me, and I could go back to my life like nothing had changed. But it had. Something had changed. I changed. I learned that fear doesn't always come as screams in the night or monsters in the rear view. Sometimes it arrives as your own reflection doing things you don't remember, as silence that thickens when you should feel relief, as a road that dares you to keep going when every part of you wants to turn back. Fear is patient. It waits in the cracks, in the stories we laugh off, in the gas station glances and the half-finished sentences of locals who know more than they'll say. But here's the thing no one tells you. So is courage. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the decision to keep driving. Sometimes it's turning around. Sometimes it's climbing into an RV when everything in your soul is screaming not to. And sometimes courage is surviving long enough to tell someone else the road is out there, that it's real, that you're real. I can't explain what Route 666 really is. Is it cursed land? Is it something out of time or something ancient that feeds on motion and memory? I don't know. But I do know this. There are roads in America that weren't meant to be paved. Campgrounds built where no fire should burn. There are trails through the desert that don't lead to any place that belongs to the living. And if you ever find yourself driving through New Mexico, if the numbers on your GPS flicker, if you pass the same sign twice, or a vehicle behind you starts matching every move without a driver, you turn off. Don't reason it out. Don't second guess. You turn off, you wait, you breathe, you remember this voice, because I'm still here. And I don't know how many others made it back, but I did. And I will never forget the sound of that engine behind me. Never forget what it meant to fight through the whispering static and say, no, not me, not this time. So when you're out there, traveling across this beautiful haunted country, chasing sunrises and sleeping under stars, be ready, be still enough to hear the land speak, but not so still that you forget to listen. Because not all ghosts are dead, not all shadows belong to trees, and some stories, like this one, they don't end when the road does. They stay with you, they ride with you, and maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for someone else to see them. So drive safe, friends, and if you see a second version of your RV behind you, don't stop, not even for a second. I didn't plan to stay in the forest more than a night. That stretch of pine off the old fire road wasn't even my first choice, just the only patch flat enough for the van when the sun dipped behind the Oregon ridgeline. My original plan had been to push closer to Mount Hood, maybe reach a spot with a view, but by late afternoon, the road turned to rutted dirt, the trees grew thicker, and my arms ached from fighting the wheel over rock and root. The forest just seemed to open up to me there, quiet, still, unbothered. I parked, killed the engine, stepped out into cool air that smelled of wet moss and something sweeter underneath, like fallen pine needles sun-baked on asphalt. The light cut between the trees in slanted orange strips, and for a moment it all felt peaceful, like I'd slipped between the pages of some forgotten nature magazine. No signal, of course, but that was part of the appeal. One night to rest, then I'd keep driving. I cooked outside. Just a skillet over the propane burner, beans and eggs. I remember how the air changed around dusk. A softness came down with the light, cooler than I expected for July, and the silence thickened. Not just the absence of sound, it was like the woods were holding their breath. Still, it didn't feel threatening, just lonely. That good kind of lonely you sometimes get when you're deep in the wild and start to remember how small you really are. When I climbed into the van, I left the side window cracked and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. No fire, no music, just the breeze and the tick of the van cooling down. That night I dreamed I was still driving. It felt endless. The van drifted along the same forest road, the headlights catching trees that looked exactly like the last. No matter how long I drove, I never found a turnoff or sign of life. I remember the dread crawling in when the dashboard clock stayed stuck at 7:19, like time had peeled away and left me behind. When I woke up, I laughed a little, shook it off. I pulled the zipper down, rubbed my face, and looked outside. Something was wrong. It wasn't the light. It was still early, blue and gray, misted in that damp forest way, but it felt too similar, too still. I stepped out of the van and turned in a slow circle. My footprints from the night before, still there, pressed into the dirt beside the sliding door. Same placement, same angle. I hadn't expected that, but maybe the night air froze the ground just enough. What pulled at me more was the position of the sun. Same angle through the trees. Same colors caught in the mist. I took a walk to clear my head. Just around the camp, 15 minutes tops. But as I walked back, I felt it again, that odd tug in my chest, like something familiar was out of place. And when I reached the van, I saw myself, standing right there, facing the sliding door, same hoodie, same jeans, me. I stopped cold, mouth open, breath locked in my chest, but the figure didn't move, didn't look up. It was me, exactly as I'd stood there the night before, staring into the woods. I blinked, gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just trees and wind and the soft groan of my van settling into the dirt. I must have imagined it. Leftover dream residue. My brain hadn't caught up yet, that was all. So I shook it off again, a little harder this time, and climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key. The van didn't start. I tried again. Nothing. The silence that followed pressed so tightly against my ears it almost hummed. I checked the battery, the cables, everything was fine. Nothing drained, no lights left on, just wouldn't start. A slow churn of unease started in my stomach. I reached for my phone, instinctively, even knowing the answer. Still no signal. I waited. I boiled water, ate the same breakfast, eggs and beans. It tasted exactly the same, like I hadn't cooked it but remembered it. The clouds broke by noon. I made a decision then. I'd hike to the trailhead. There had to be one nearby. I'd passed a small wood sign an hour before I pulled off last night. I packed light, water bottle, bar, knife, left the van door unlocked. The forest swallowed me fast. I followed what looked like a deer path, but it twisted strangely, too regular for animal tracks. As I walked, I kept checking the trees, looking for markings for something man-made. Every bend looked familiar, though I swore I hadn't gone that way before. The air thickened. I stopped to rest, closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was back at the van. No sound. No steps behind me. Just back. That was the first time I felt something tighten in my throat that I couldn't swallow. I tried again, took a different direction, picked a bearing and followed it with the sun as my guide. Same thing. 40 minutes out, maybe an hour, and I'd look up and see my van again. Like it never left. Like I never left. I stood still for a long time, sweat cooling on my skin, the wind touching the back of my neck in short, sharp bursts. The pine scent was stronger now, almost sickly sweet, like sap gone sour. And I realized something else. The footprints by the van weren't mine anymore. They were too fresh, edges still sharp in the dirt. I hadn't walked that way yet. And that's when I saw movement inside, just a flicker through the cracked window. The curtain shifted. I crept closer, heart pounding hard enough I could feel it in my ears. I crouched behind the van, listened. Silence. Then the creak of the sleeping platform inside shifting under weight. I held my breath, and then I heard it, my own voice. Soft, breathing, asleep. I waited, until I couldn't anymore. I stood, pulled the door open fast, empty. No one, no voice, just the familiar smell of propane and denim and the faint echo of something that had already happened or was about to. The light shifted. The exact same strip of sun I remembered from yesterday crossed the floor at the same angle. It was 7:19 again, and I suddenly, horribly knew I'd been here before. I just couldn't remember how many times. The sun didn't move. That was the next thing I noticed. I sat inside the van, watching the lights stretch across the dash like a clock stuck on the same minute. No movement, no slow shift, just static, golden and unchanging, like a photograph pinned to time. I opened the door, walked outside, waited for a breeze that never came. The forest air, usually restless with whispering branches or chirping birds, was dead still. It felt like being held in suspension. Something deep in my gut turned, that quiet kind of fear, the kind that makes you doubt whether you've actually gone insane or if the world has and just forgot to tell you. I'd always prided myself on being rational. I journaled. I tracked my routes. I kept backups of my backups. But now my hands were shaking. I walked out again. Further. Slower. Not to escape this time, but to test it. Every few steps I stopped, marked a rock with my boot, snapped a branch, made signs, left a trail. I counted my paces, 24 steps between that twisted pine and the split log, 47 more to the moss-covered stump. Then 6 steps past that, I stopped, because I could see the van again. No curve in the trail, no turnaround, just back, as if I had turned without realizing it. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. Not yet. I just walked slowly back, checking my markers. They were gone. No snapped twigs, no boot prints, no moss disturbed. I sat on a stump and stared at my hands for a long time. The wind picked up then, sudden and sharp, cold. It carried a smell I hadn't noticed before, something metallic like wet iron and burnt wood. It pulled at a memory I didn't want to examine. I turned, scanning the trees. That's when I saw him. Another version of me. Again. But this time he wasn't standing by the van. He was deeper in, crouched by a tree like he was hiding. Same flannel, same frayed jeans. Same body posture I used when I was trying not to be seen. He was watching me, and when our eyes met across the distance, he ran, not toward the van, away, deeper into the trees, and against every ounce of reason, I followed him. I don't know why. Instinct? Desperation? Maybe some part of me believed he held an answer I didn't, that I could shake him by the shoulders and demand an exit, or maybe I just couldn't bear the idea of being alone with this. I sprinted after him, dodging branches, stumbling over roots, the trees blurred, dark trunks sliding past in rhythmic panic. I called out once, just once. "Hey!" He didn't stop, but I did, because I found something. A ring of ash, blackened, irregular, with scraps of wood half burnt at the edges. At first I thought it was an old fire pit, maybe from another camper, but it was wrong, too large, too scorched. In the center, a melted flashlight. My flashlight, the one I kept in the glove box. I knelt down, reaching for it. The air shifted again. Pressure. Like the forest exhaled something heavy and wet. And then a sound, low, familiar, like breath through cracked lips. It came from the trees behind me. I turned slowly. There I was again. But it wasn't me. He stood hunched, face in shadow, same clothes, but dirtier, torn. There was something off in the way he breathed, jerky, uneven, like he hadn't inhaled in days. And his mouth hung open slightly, just enough for me to see something. Twitch. I stepped back. He mirrored me. One step. Two. Then he smiled. It was the worst thing I've ever seen, because it wasn't my smile. It was too wide. Wrong. A grimace pretending to be human. And behind it his eyes shimmered, not with light, but with reflection. Like they weren't eyes at all, just glassy black pools trying to mimic them. I ran, didn't look back. Branches whipped my arms, tore at my sleeves. I tripped once, slammed my knee into a rock, but kept moving. And somehow I burst back into the clearing, the van sitting exactly as it had been. The sun was still stuck in the sky. I dove inside, locked the doors, and curled into the driver's seat. My breath came fast and shallow, the kind of breath that makes your fingertips tingle. And then, slowly, the van began to warm. Light shifted, just slightly. I looked at the clock. 7:20. It had moved. Only a minute. But something had broken. That's when I heard it. Footsteps outside. Not walking. Running. I pressed myself low, ducking below the window. The footsteps circled, fast, heavy, then they stopped on the passenger side, a whisper against the glass. "Hey," my voice, but I wasn't speaking. Then slam. A hand slapped the side window, hard. The van rocked slightly. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Silence returned, and when I looked, nothing, no one, just the woods, still as ever. But I knew, deep in my chest, in that place your instincts live, that something was inside the loop with me, something that wore my face. And it was learning. Each loop, it got closer. Each loop, it remembered more. And I had no idea how many versions of me were out there already, or which one was the original. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just another echo, another failed escape, another scream stuck in the trees. I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. Pale, eyes sunken, lips trembling. And I whispered just to myself, if I don't get out this time, will I become him? The van stayed silent, and somewhere just beyond the tree line, something answered, a faint echo, the same whisper I'd just spoken. If I don't get out this time, and then, will I become him? Mimicking me. Perfectly. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, if you could even call it that, the light still hadn't changed. It just stayed there, stuck in that amber gold haze like a movie reel frozen mid-frame. I tried eating, but everything tasted wrong, like wet paper and copper. I spat it out and drank water from my thermos, but it didn't help. There was no hunger, no thirst, only dread. I stepped out of the van again. My legs were trembling beneath me, but I forced myself to walk the perimeter. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe another loop marker, maybe some clue that the last version of me had left behind. But the clearing looked exactly as it had the first time, except a hoodie. My hoodie. Folded neatly on a tree stump I hadn't noticed before. And on top of it, my journal, the one I kept locked in the back drawer of the van. I didn't approach right away. Something in me hesitated, the same way you'd hesitate if you found your own grave already dug, or your name written on a headstone you never ordered. But curiosity has teeth, and the silence pressed so tight around me that I needed to hear something, even if it was just my own words. So I picked up the journal. The first few pages were blank, then smeared, like they'd been soaked in something and dried in heat. But near the middle, I found entries I didn't write, my handwriting, my style, even my sarcastic margin notes, but I had no memory of putting any of this down. Day 3, assuming it's the 3rd. Time doesn't move. The sun mocks me. I keep finding my own footprints and forgetting which pair are now and which are before. Saw myself again. This time I wasn't alone. The other version had someone with him. A girl. I couldn't see her face. She looked afraid. Was she real? I heard something last night in the trees. It wasn't me. It sounded like a copy of my voice, but off. Like a recording played backward, then forward again. I froze on that last one. The handwriting became more frantic after it. Less structured. Fewer jokes. If I'm reading this again, I've probably lost it completely. But you're not the first me to try. None of us made it out. We just echo. My hands went cold. Because I flipped to the very last page, and it had only one line, scrawled in ink so deep it had bled through. Don't trust the next version of you. He smiles. That was it. I backed away from the stump, heart thudding in my ribs. The forest leaned in, branches creaking, like it had been holding its breath for me to read that final line. Then somewhere, not far, maybe just 50 feet off, I heard leaves crunch, deliberate, not wind, footsteps. I dropped the journal. Then I heard another sound, something low, wet, laughter, my laughter. But not how I laugh, not the dry, quiet exhale I do when something makes me nervous. This was loud, barking, sharp-edged and guttural, like someone trying to imitate me and getting it just wrong enough to make it inhuman. I ran. No plan, just back to the van. The door slammed shut behind me, and I locked everything I could, doors, glove box, even wedged the folding table under the sliding door rail. Then silence, but not the good kind. This silence was a vacuum. Every sound pulled away, like the world itself was bracing for something to snap. And then I saw movement. Through the windshield. Me, standing at the edge of the trees about 20 feet out, same clothes, same boots, head tilted slightly like he'd just been called by name. He didn't move, didn't blink, but his mouth started to open. And then the smile, wide. Too wide, lips peeled back over perfect teeth. It wasn't a grin, it was a display, like an animal showing submission or threat. I backed into the corner of the van. He didn't come closer, just stared. And then behind him, another me stepped out from the brush, and another. 3 of us, just standing there, each one slightly different. One limped. One's shirt was torn. One was soaked to the bone as if he just climbed out of a river I couldn't see. And then one of them whispered something I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to. I felt it. The thought sank into my head like a needle through fabric. You are not the original anymore. And somehow, I believed it. The first me stepped forward, slowly, raising one hand. I couldn't move. And then, flash. I woke up in the van, sitting up, sweat clinging to my shirt. Everything was as it had been. But the sun had shifted, only slightly, maybe 10 minutes. The time loop hadn't reset, not fully, but it had jumped, like someone else had changed something and dragged me along. I checked the glove box. The flashlight was gone. The journal too. The hoodie, now folded beside me on the bed. And the worst part, the van smelled like smoke, the kind of smoke from a campfire long dead, or a body burned out. And in the distance, soft as breath, I heard myself whisper, "Only one of us makes it out." I didn't speak those words, but they came from my mouth, and I wasn't alone in here. Not anymore. I didn't move for a long time. Every muscle in my body felt like it had seized up, coiled and waiting. Like some primal part of me knew that whatever had spoken in my voice was still nearby. Maybe inside the van. Maybe inside me. I don't know how to explain that. It wasn't possession, not like in movies. It felt more like overlap. Like there were too many versions of me in one space, trying to breathe through the same lungs. And something had decided I was the extra. I finally forced myself up, shaky and cautious, and turned every corner of the van inside out. Nothing. No signs of anyone else. No missing gear aside from the flashlight. The hoodie was still there, folded neatly, like it had always been. I touched it. It was still warm. That was impossible. I hadn't worn it since I first got here. I opened the van door slowly, expecting to see another version of me waiting again at the edge of the woods, but the forest was empty. Still, that wrong kind of still, where even the bugs don't trust the silence. I stepped outside. I needed fresh air, even if it reeked of pine needles and old damp earth. My skin was cold despite the sun still hovering high overhead, glowing just a few degrees too orange, like an old heat lamp that never turns off. I walked to the clearing's edge and saw a new set of tracks. Mine, definitely mine, but they were leading into the forest, a direction I hadn't gone before. I stared at them for a long time. Something in me said follow them. Another part screamed no, that's how it gets you. But standing still wasn't helping. I wasn't going to sit in the van while the next version of me smiled through the window again. So I walked. Every step felt like a dare. The woods closed around me like a throat. As I walked, I started to hear it again. That faint sound, like someone whispering just out of range. Not my voice this time. Something else. Slurred, drawn out. The syllables didn't make sense, but I understood the emotion behind them. Regret. Branches cracked above me, but I didn't look up. I didn't want to see another me crouched in a tree like some predator. I just kept following the tracks, heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. After what felt like an hour, but time's useless here, I found something. A small campsite. Empty. Tarp draped over 2 logs, burnt-out fire pit. A metal mug sitting in a patch of moss, filled halfway with rainwater and rust, and on the ground next to it, my wallet. I knelt slowly, picked it up. All the cards were there. ID. The $20 bill I always keep folded behind the license. My dog-eared emergency contact card with my sister's number scratched across it, and a Polaroid I hadn't seen in years. Me and Lauren. On the beach in Oregon. The one where we swore we'd start doing more road trips. She was still alive in that photo. Hair tangled by the wind, her face half-shadowed but beaming. I never brought this photo with me. It was supposed to be in my drawer back home. And I remembered something I'd tried to forget. The reason I started this RV trip in the first place. After the crash, I couldn't sit still. Couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voicemail over and over. The last one she left me before getting in that car. The one I didn't answer because I was too busy rewatching some dumb documentary. She'd said, let's just drive somewhere, okay? I don't care where, just you and me and no clocks. And now I was here. No clocks, no time. Maybe that's what this place feeds on. People like me. People running from their own timelines. I dropped the wallet and turned around, and that's when I saw him again. Another version of me. Closer than before. He wasn't smiling this time. His face looked ruined, like it had been dragged across gravel. One eye swollen shut, lips cracked and bleeding, his hoodie soaked in something black. He lifted his hand slowly and pointed behind me. I turned. A tree stump, not the one near the van. This one was old, split down the middle like it had been struck by lightning, and carved into the bark in ragged, desperate strokes. Only one version survives. My stomach dropped, because suddenly I understood what had been happening. This wasn't just a time loop. This was a funnel. Every version of me that ever came here, every failed escape, every second guess, they didn't vanish. They collected. Layer after layer of me, stuck in this forest, reliving the same moment from different angles, all trying to claw their way out. And something was deciding who gets to leave. One. Just one. The rest, I didn't want to think about it. I turned back to the ruined version of myself, but he was gone. No footsteps, no sound. I backed away, heart hammering, and ran. Branches lashed at my arms, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop until I saw the van again, my beacon of false safety. I sprinted for the door, slammed it shut behind me, locked it, and that's when I heard it, a knock. Slow, rhythmic, measured, coming from underneath the van. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more, like a code, like it was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. And then, faintly, almost playfully, I heard my voice from beneath the floorboards. "Your turn," I screamed, but no one answered. I scrambled away from the floor as if it had burned me, knees hitting the cabinets, hands braced against the wall. My voice, still echoed in my head like it had vibrated through my bones instead of my ears. "Your turn." 3 knocks again, slower this time, mocking. I pulled open the drawer where I kept the tire iron and gripped it tight. I knew how stupid it was, swinging metal at something that wasn't exactly flesh anymore. But I needed something solid, something that wasn't slipping through time like the rest of this place. Even the weight of the iron in my hand felt grounding, real. The knocking stopped. I didn't move. I stayed there for minutes, maybe more, my breath too loud, the silence too perfect. Then a faint scraping. Something, or someone, was crawling out from underneath the RV. I braced, but nothing came. Just the sound of breathing, shallow but fast, labored, like someone winded after a long sprint. Or it was coming from just outside the door. I tiptoed to the side window and peeked through the curtain. No one. But that breathing, it was louder now, like it was in my ear. Then it was. I spun around and saw the small mirror above the sink. And in it, my reflection wasn't mine. Same face, same bruises I'd earned from tripping in the woods. But the expression, it wasn't scared. It was waiting. Eyes locked on mine, like it had expected this moment. Like this was part of its day, not mine. Then its mouth moved, not mine. It mouthed the words slowly. "You're almost ready." I looked down, but my lips were still pressed together so tight they hurt. The reflection smiled, then blinked, and it was gone. Back to normal. My own terrified face staring back at me. I couldn't do this anymore. I threw the van into gear and hit the gas. I didn't care where I went. I didn't care if I had to crash through half the forest to get there. I just needed out, needed to move. Trees whipped past the windows. The sun never changed, always that same muted, sickly gold stuck overhead like a lie. I followed the dirt trail I hadn't seen before, the one my footprints had led toward. It curved deeper into the woods, but it didn't matter. I had to believe movement meant progress, meant change. But then I saw it, the clearing, the van, my van, exactly where I started. But here's the thing, it wasn't empty. There was a version of me sitting inside, head in hands, shaking. I knew that posture, that moment. That was me from yesterday. The first reset. I killed the engine and stared. He didn't notice me, but I noticed something else. The trees had shifted. I swear to God they were watching. Or not the trees exactly, but the spaces between them. Shadows that didn't behave like shadows, still as death. Positioned just wrong enough that my brain refused to make sense of them. I watched one lean, not fall, lean toward the RV, toward him. I jumped out of my van and ran. Tire irons still clutched like some medieval weapon. I couldn't let it take him, even if he was me, even if he already had become me. I screamed his name, my name, anything to get his attention. But it was like I didn't exist to him. He didn't move, just kept shaking like I had. The shadows slid closer. No legs, just presence, like smoke you could drown in. I hit one with the iron, or tried to. It passed through, but something moved. It recoiled, just slightly as if surprised I tried, as if amused. Then the forest changed again, like someone spun the world on a lazy Susan. Suddenly I was outside the clearing again, alone, and the van, the other me, was gone. No trail, no noise, just me and the weight of my own heartbeat in my ears. I fell to my knees. I stayed like that for what felt like days. The silence was worse than the loop, worse than the voices, because it made me think. Made me feel the corners of my mind stretch into places I didn't want to visit. What if I'm not meant to leave? What if this place doesn't trap you? It tests you. Not just to survive, but to choose, to decide which version of yourself gets to go forward. The coward, the fighter, the regretful, the cruel, the cruel. Which one is worthy? My throat burned. I hadn't realized I was sobbing until I tasted salt and dust on my lips. I whispered out loud, just once. I don't want to do this anymore. The wind answered me, a faint rush through the leaves, low and steady, but there was something in it, a hum. And beneath that, something like a voice, Not clear, not even words, but intent. Then stop repeating. That's what it felt like. I rose, slowly. The van was gone, my path erased again, but this time I didn't panic. I walked. Deliberate. Not away, not toward anything, just through. And for the first time, the loop didn't fight back. I walked for what felt like hours. No compass, no trail, just the soft crush of leaves underfoot and the hush of trees leaning in like listeners who'd heard everything before. I kept my eyes ahead, refusing to glance back, not even once. That's what the loop wanted. That's what it fed on. Doubt, repetition, regret. But it was there, still, behind me. That itch on the back of the neck, that whisper of breath you can't quite catch. The idea that maybe something followed me, not to kill me, but to remind me of the time I hesitated, the choices I made, or didn't. The sun hadn't moved, but I had. I came upon a dried-up creek bed, shallow and cracked like something forgotten. I knew it instantly, not from this loop, but from the very first day I arrived. I'd filled my canteen there, swatted a mosquito off my wrist, smelled the faint sweetness of pine. The moment was still folded somewhere deep in me, untouched by all the resets. That moment was true. And then I saw it, a figure, kneeling by the bank, scooping dry dust with shaking hands. It was me, but older, tired, clothes torn, hair dirty, face drawn, a version I hadn't seen before, not part of the loop. I stepped forward, his head turned slowly. No surprise in his eyes, just recognition and pity. "I thought I buried you," he said quietly. The voice was raw, like it hadn't spoken in years. I swallowed. "What is this?" He stood. Same height, same weight, same scars, just deeper. "You kept going," he said, when the rest of us gave up, a silence between us. Thick, weighted with meaning I didn't understand yet. He gestured toward the woods behind him. "You'll see them soon, the others." I didn't move. I couldn't. "Which one are you?" I asked of me. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. "The last one." That stopped me. The last, before I could speak, the trees opened behind him, not physically, but visually. They widened somehow, like space itself softened and let in something else. I saw them, dozens of me, scattered across the clearing, some pacing, some sobbing, one curled in a ball, whispering something to himself in a loop, another carving marks into the dirt with a stick, lines and symbols that made no sense. I watched one version walk directly toward a tree and press his head against it, as if begging it to absorb him. They were all broken in different ways, versions I might have become, might still. The older me stepped back. This is the cost. Every time you try to break it, you leave one behind. Not a shadow, not a dream, a piece of you, splintered. He tapped his temple, and they don't forget. I started shaking. How do I stop it? You don't. His voice softened. You choose which version walks out. A moment passed, then another, and I understood. I wasn't fighting a place. I was fighting my own refusal to move on. To make peace with the things I'd buried before I ever set foot in this forest. The loop didn't want my body. It wanted my accountability. The wind kicked up, sharp and cool, like a whisper brushing across bare skin, and I heard it. Choose. Behind me, my RV sat parked, somehow right there in the clearing, quiet, untouched, like the day I'd arrived. The final version of me, the older one, nodded. It's time. And he turned, walked back into the trees, leaving me standing alone. I turned toward the van. With each step, I felt the weight of the other versions pulling at me. Not physically, but emotionally. Their sadness, their rage, their unwillingness to move on. But I kept walking, hand on the door, one breath, then another. Then everything blinked. The world snapped back into real-time motion. The sun shifted. A breeze moved naturally for once, not in circles. Birds chirped, startled by my presence, and I was out. Back at the edge of the highway, my van. Parked under a sign for a campground that had never been marked on the maps. No bruises, no time missing. But I felt it, inside, like I'd left someone buried back there, like the cost had been paid. I didn't speak about it for a long time. Not to anyone. I just kept moving. New roads, new forests, but I never parked deep in the woods again. And some nights, when I close my eyes, I see them, the ones I left behind, watching from the tree line, waiting. Not for rescue, but for me. And I wonder if one day I'll circle back by accident, take a wrong turn, and end up there again? And if I do, will I be the version that makes it out, or just another that never does? Either way, I keep driving, because forward is the only direction that still feels real, and I never answer the knock. Not anymore. I used to think abandoned RV parks were just relics of bad business, victims of overexpansion, economic downturns, or maybe just bad weather. Places with cracked pavement and rusted hookups where grass grew wild through gravel and time forgot the reservations. But after last fall, I don't think that anymore. I was traveling alone then. Took a few weeks off after quitting a job I should have left years earlier. My Volkswagen Westfalia had just gotten new tires and I needed air, space to figure things out. Maybe breathe in some clarity. I'd made it from Utah to eastern Nevada, skirting the edge of the Great Basin. Dry wind, sun that feels like it comes from two directions, miles of scrub and nothing else, the kind of silence that feels intentional. It was mid-October, and most campgrounds had either shut down for the season or were booked out with hunters. I wasn't in the mood for packed sites or shared fire pits. I just wanted stillness. Maybe a beer by the fire. Maybe sleep without someone pulling in next to me at midnight with generator noise and yelling kids. I spotted it on an old map app I sometimes use for remote boondocking. A pin dropped over a faint rectangle off Highway 93. The label just said Creekside RV Defunct. No reviews, no pictures. I almost swiped past it, but something about the name Creekside. It felt personal, like it belonged in a memory I hadn't lived yet. I should have kept driving. It wasn't easy to find. The turnoff wasn't marked, and my GPS gave up about 6 miles from the spot. The dirt road that led to it was half washed out from the last rain. Sagebrush clawed at the sides of my van, and the only other signs of life were the occasional lizard or hawk circling far overhead. But eventually the trees changed, from dry and scattered to thicker, denser. Cottonwoods mostly, bent slightly inward like they'd been watching something too long. The sun slipped behind them earlier than it should have, and the light turned that weird grayish gold that never fully touches the ground. Then, like something revealing itself only when you were too deep to turn around, the campground appeared. Creekside RV Park. It looked almost preserved, as if the place had been abandoned all at once but untouched since. There were 12 pads arranged in a loose horseshoe, overgrown with weeds but not fully reclaimed. A small wooden office stood at the entrance, windows intact, door slightly ajar. A faded "Welcome Campers" sign leaned against the front. No graffiti, no signs of partying teens or squatters, just time standing still. I pulled in slowly, tires crunching over gravel that felt too intact for the years it had supposedly sat empty. I parked near pad 4 under a cottonwood half-shaded and shut off the engine. Silence. Not the natural kind. Not the usual rustle of leaves or distant birdsong. It was like the world around the park was waiting to inhale or holding its breath. Still, I told myself it was fine. Peaceful, even. I got out, stretched, walked a few laps to shake off the drive. The sun was setting and the whole park turned amber. Shadows lengthening, trees swaying just enough to whisper, but not enough to comfort. There was an old fire ring near the edge, close to a narrow trail that led into the brush. I didn't explore it. Something about the dark gap between the trees felt off, like a mouth held open in surprise. Instead, I opened a beer, sat on a camp chair, and watched the sky turn. Stars came out quick, no light pollution out there, just blackened stars and the sound of my own thoughts. That's when I noticed it. The first thing that felt wrong. The lights. Tiny glints, way out across the far end of the park. Faint, low to the ground. Not bright enough to be lanterns or flashlights, just flickers, like reflections off glass. Then nothing. Then another, farther to the right, always in that same slow rhythm. I stood thinking maybe someone else had pulled in without me noticing. But there were no engines, no gravel crunching, just those brief flashes. I called out, "Hey, anyone else out here?" Silence answered. I walked a bit in their direction, past the old office and toward the back row of sites. The flickers stopped. I stood in the dark, eyes adjusting, trying to feel more brave than I was. That's when I noticed the sign, half buried near pad 11, a wooden post with a worn-out placard still hanging from rusted hooks. Quiet hours begin at sunset. Please respect those who remain. I stared at that last line for a long time. The font wasn't spooky. It wasn't even scratched up. It was normal. But something about the phrasing, it didn't say campers. It said those who remain. I backed away, slowly. Told myself it was just weird wording, that I was tired, that I hadn't eaten enough today, and maybe that beer was hitting harder than it should. I made myself laugh just a little, just enough to hear something human in that space. But as I turned to head back to my van, I heard it. A soft creak, like the sway of a swing. But there were no swings. I froze. The sound came again, wood shifting, slowly in rhythm. I looked toward the office building and squinted. There was a porch swing there. I hadn't noticed it earlier, and it was moving, back and forth, very gently, like someone had just stood up from it. But no one was there. The swing slowed and finally stopped. My heart was pounding, not because of what I saw, but because I couldn't convince myself there was wind. The trees weren't moving. My skin was still. The air was dead. I walked quickly back to the van, locked the doors, told myself I'd leave first thing in the morning, that I was safe, that I was imagining it. But I didn't sleep, not really, because sometime around 2 a.m. I heard the sound of an RV engine, not mine, and it never got closer. It just idled somewhere out in the dark, low, steady, distant. I tried to look, but there were no lights, just sound. And then, after maybe 20 minutes, it stopped, completely. And the silence after was louder than anything I've ever heard. I didn't get out of the van that morning. Not right away. I just sat there behind the wheel, wrapped in my sleeping bag, watching the early light seep through the windshield in that dull, metallic way it does when your nerves are frayed. The kind of light that feels more like an interrogation lamp than sunrise. There were no tracks in the gravel when I finally stepped outside. Nothing to prove another vehicle had been there. No fresh indentations, no oil drips, just my own footprints from the night before, half faded. That was it. And yet, I'd heard it, the rumble, the way it idled just beyond the trees, too deep to be a passing car, too real to be a dream. But the silence now was complete. Too complete. It was colder than it should have been. Not just chilly, but that strange, damp cold that feels unnatural for a desert morning. My breath clouded in front of me as I stepped further out. It didn't make sense. My weather app had called for high 50s overnight. This felt like high 30s, like the air itself had thinned. I glanced again at the office. The swing on the porch was still now, perfectly still. But something about the angle, it looked different. Shifted maybe a foot to the right. I hadn't touched it. There was no wind. I should have left. I should have gotten in the driver's seat and pulled out, bad tires be damned. But I didn't. Instead, I did something I still don't understand. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the back of the campground, toward that faded placard, toward pad 11. I needed to prove to myself it was nothing, that the strangeness was just sleep deprivation. Just some leftover stress bleeding out from the job I'd left behind. I told myself, just walk through it once, get your bearings, get it out of your system. The grass was taller back there, stiffer, brittle against my legs, even through my jeans. The farther I walked, the more it felt like I was walking into a pocket of stillness. Even the air had a texture to it, thick and close, like a held breath. When I reached pad 11, I noticed something that hadn't registered the night before. There was a picnic table. Most pads had one, but this one was different. It was set. I don't mean trash someone left behind. I mean set. 2 plates, faded but not broken. Plastic cups, forks arranged neatly. A centerpiece made of dried flowers. It looked like it had been waiting, like someone had prepared it and stepped away. Years ago. Days ago. I don't know. I knelt down and picked up a fork. No rust, no dust. That was the moment my body finally caught up to the fear. My hands started to tremble, and I put the fork back exactly where I found it. I took one step back, then another, and then I noticed the photographs. There were 4 of them, taped to the side of the picnic table bench, weathered but legible, black and white, old. Faces from another era, smiling in front of RVs that look like museum pieces. One woman holding a dog, a little boy with a bowl cut, flashing a peace sign. Except all 4 people had their eyes scratched out, not violently, precisely, like someone had taken a pin and poked out just the eyes on each face. One tiny, deliberate puncture in each photo. That was it. I turned around and walked fast. Not running, not yet. Just fast enough that I could feel the panic right behind my heels, like something gaining on me with every step. Back at the van, I grabbed the keys from the ignition, started the engine, and threw it into reverse so hard the tires kicked up gravel against the undercarriage. I didn't care. I just needed to get out of there. I backed down the entry road, half bouncing over ruts and brush. The rearview mirror was filled with swaying cottonwoods and the blurred outline of the office disappearing behind me. I didn't stop driving until I hit the main road again. Asphalt never felt so solid. But here's the thing. That should have been the end. Only it wasn't. Because 3 days later, in a completely different part of Nevada, I met someone who'd been to the same place. It was at a small RV supply store outside Tonopah. I'd pulled in to replace a leaking propane line and was chatting with the owner, a woman in her 60s with a faded tattoo on her forearm and a raspy voice that made everything sound like a secret. I told her I'd been camping off-grid. She asked where. I mentioned Creekside without even thinking, just a slip of memory, like a splinter working itself to the surface. She paused, looked at me carefully. "Which Creekside?" she asked. I told her I didn't know there was more than one. "There ain't," she said, almost under her breath. "Not anymore." She pulled out a yellowed envelope from behind the counter. Inside were old photos, some RV parks, some just buildings. She laid one out. It was the same park, same horseshoe layout, same cottonwoods. Cottonwoods. That place shut down back in '92, she said. Flood took out the South Trail. Few folks got stranded during a storm. Found them 3 days later, still sitting at their tables, like they was waiting for something. She tapped the photo gently. They buried him nearby. Whole family didn't want him in town cemetery. Superstition, I guess. My skin prickled. She looked up. "You didn't see nothing strange, did you?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then lied. "No," I said, "just quiet." She didn't smile, just nodded, and then she said something that made my stomach turn cold. "They say the place remembers you," she murmured. "That once you've stepped into it, it knows your name." I tried to move on after that, tried to convince myself it was just a strange coincidence, a relic of history I'd stumbled into. Some old place soaked in leftover memories. That's all. But that night, parked outside a Flying J in the middle of nowhere, I dreamt I was back at Pad 11. Only it wasn't a dream, at least not one like I'd ever had before. I could feel the texture of the bench under my fingertips, the weight of the fork in my hand, the exact pressure of the air, humid, like something had recently breathed nearby. The dream was locked in the same moment over and over, me sitting across from someone I couldn't see, plates full of food between us, untouched, waiting. My chest tight, like I knew what came next, but couldn't make myself look up. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, with my seat fully reclined and the keys back in the ignition. I don't remember doing that. The next day, I covered hundreds of miles, just drove, trying to outrun whatever sense of dread had taken root. But the feeling followed me. It clung. Not like paranoia exactly, but like gravity. Like a weight you forget is there until you move the wrong way and feel the pull. I stopped sleeping with the lights off in the van, and every few nights, no matter how far I drove, I'd wake to the same sound, gravel shifting outside my window. Just once, then silence. It was always just enough to sit me bolt upright, and each time I'd tell myself, just a possum, a raccoon, wind maybe. But I never heard it come or go. Just that one shift, like a footstep. I started researching, not because I wanted to, but because I had to, because I needed to know I wasn't the first, that someone else had been where I was, that I hadn't broken something open by stepping onto that land. And I found more than I expected. There are forums, quiet ones buried deep, where people talk about places like Creekside. Not just that one, but others. Dozens of abandoned RV parks scattered across the country, each with their own stories, patterns, set tables, photos left behind, people who vanish or come back changed, quieter, unsettled. They don't all tell their stories. Some just leave hints, coordinates, a phrase or two. One post stuck with me. It was from 2009. A user named SignalLost22 had written only this. Pat 11. The meal was still warm. I never saw her face. That was it. No reply. No account history. Just those words. I kept digging. Eventually, I found a map, crowdsourced, incomplete, probably fake in a dozen places. But still, the pattern was there. A thin scatter of sites all across the West. Arizona, Utah, parts of Oregon. Always remote, always short-lived. RV parks that opened in the 70s and 80s, then disappeared without a trace. And here's where it starts getting harder to explain. I began to feel pulled toward them. Not in a way that made sense. Not like curiosity. More like a suggestion. A whisper under thought. I'd find myself rerouting, checking back roads, telling myself I just wanted to camp somewhere quiet. But every time I arrived at a new place, even one that looked totally innocent, there was always something wrong. Sometimes it was the birds. There wouldn't be any. Other times it was the grass, too long, too uniform, like it had been planted to cover something up. Once in eastern Oregon, I pulled into a clearing that wasn't on any map. Just a flat space with old hookups sticking up like broken bones. I didn't even get out. I could feel something waiting in the silence. So I started talking to others, fellow RVers, campers, the ones who kept to the back roads, who knew the spots that didn't show up on your average app. And that's when I met Sarah. She was parked next to me one night outside of Carson City, older, maybe late 50s, driving a rusted-out Winnebago. We shared a beer, talked about the usual, weather, mechanical issues, the loneliness that comes and goes, and then I mentioned Creekside. She didn't flinch, didn't look surprised, just stared down at the rim of her can. You saw the table, didn't you? She asked. I nodded. I did too, she said, 20 years ago. She'd been camping with her brother. He'd found the place by accident, thought it was perfect, secluded, quiet, free. He didn't leave with me, she said, her voice going thin. I went to get firewood, gone 20 minutes, came back and he was just sitting there at the table, same one you saw. I didn't breathe. He wouldn't speak, she continued, wouldn't look at me, just sat there. I tried to pull him away. I screamed, I cried. He never moved. She took another drink, hands shaking just enough to make the can rattle. I left that night. He didn't come, and I knew I couldn't go back for him. There was silence between us for a while. Then she said, they follow you, you know, those places. Once you see one, it's like you're part of their circuit, like they know you're looking, and they want you to keep looking. I didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. And the next morning, her RV was gone. No tire marks, no sign she'd been there at all. Just the faint smell of wood smoke where her fire pit had been. I started seeing them in the corners of my eyes. Not people exactly, more like silhouettes. Still figures where they shouldn't be. At first, I chalked it up to fatigue, bad lighting, peripheral tricks, but then they started showing up in reflections, in the rearview mirror, in the side windows of the van, a flash of standing just behind me, too close to be a stranger. Gone when I turned, but leaving that unmistakable sense of space having just been filled. I stopped driving at night, not because I was afraid of what I might see, but because I was afraid of where I might end up. That I'd blank out, like that night at the Flying J, and find myself parked somewhere I didn't remember arriving. Somewhere with a table waiting, with silverware already laid out. I began cataloging them, the parks, or what was left of them. Abandoned sites hidden behind rows of pines, gravel loops erased by time, hookups rusted, the plastic caps still clinging to threads like little white lids. There was one in southern Colorado, high up at the edge of a cliff where the air felt thinner than it should. Nothing left but concrete pads and a single metal sign that had half fallen, resting against the dirt at an angle. The name had been scratched out. But at the far end, closest to the drop, someone had left a plastic lawn chair, bright blue, untouched by weather, facing the canyon. I didn't sit in it. I don't know why, but something about it felt occupied. The chair had a smell too, like bleach, and something else I still can't place, like burned sugar almost. I backed away slowly. Didn't stay the night. I camped 3 towns over and still couldn't sleep. The line between memory and dream started to blur after that. I'd wake in the middle of the night with words already in my mouth, like I'd been talking to someone. My hands reaching out towards something, towards someone I couldn't see. My mouth dry, my throat sore. Once, I woke up standing outside the van, just standing there, door wide open, feet in the gravel, still barefoot, like I'd gone out to greet someone and forgotten what I was doing. That's when I knew I needed to stop, to end this road trip, to stop chasing ghosts. So I drove home, or I tried to, but every route I took kept bending. I'm not being metaphorical. I mean physically. Roads that curved the wrong way, landmarks in the wrong place, towns I knew by heart appearing out of order, like puzzle pieces shuffled by some hidden hand. At first, I thought I'd lost my mind, that I was hallucinating. Maybe I had some kind of neurological issue, a tumor, sleep deprivation, something, anything that would make sense. But then I started recognizing the places again, not from the maps, but from the stories. Old parks, abandoned paths, the same cracked concrete, the same weirdly preserved objects, a swing swaying too gently, a table with one cup sitting on it, a dog leash nailed to a post, no collar in sight, and always, always the sense of waiting, like these places hadn't been forgotten, like they'd been set aside. Prepared. One night, I stopped to rest at a pull-off on a stretch of empty highway in Utah, just a wide gravel shoulder with nothing around, no signs, no service. I didn't even mean to stop. I just did. My hands turned the wheel without thinking. I parked, turned off the ignition, and then I heard it, a clink, like silverware. I turned around slowly. In the far edge of my headlights, half obscured by brush, was a table. Not a picnic table, a proper wooden one, like something out of a dining room. Full place settings, wine glasses, candles unlit, no chairs, just the table, waiting. I sat there in the van, frozen, my heart hammering. I tried to start the engine and stalled twice, hands shaking so hard I couldn't grip the key. When the headlights flickered, just once, like a dying breath, I swear I saw someone standing on the other side of the table, a dark shape, looking right at me. I got the van running and drove until sunrise. Didn't care what direction, just away. But even as I write this, I can feel it. The gravity of those places, like they've become constellations and I'm just orbiting from one to the next. Maybe that's what these parks are. Not mistakes, not failed businesses, but traps, landmines scattered across the country, lures for people like me, lonely, searching, living on the edge of things. We roll in thinking we've found peace. But it's not peace, it's a performance, a ritual. And the park, it's not abandoned, it's watching. Always was. I stopped telling people where I was going, stopped posting photos, stopped updating the travel blog I'd started for fun. Something in me recoiled at the idea of being seen, not by strangers, not even by friends, but by the very places I was passing through. Like if I spoke too loudly about where I was headed, they'd know. They'd be ready. There was one last park, or at least I thought it was the last. I'd traced it through an old RV forum, some archived thread from 2004, where a man wrote about a park his grandfather used to stay at in Oregon, way up in the woods past Bend. He described it as eerily preserved, like time forgot it. It had no name, just coordinates. I wasn't going to go. I'd promised myself I was done. But something about that thread, it felt familiar. Like I'd read it before, like I'd written it. The road to the coordinates didn't appear on any GPS, just a dirt turnoff from a forest road, no sign, no markers. The trees grew too close together there, their limbs bending in unnatural ways, curling over the path like ribs. My tires cracked over fallen needles. I drove slowly, branches whispering against the van's frame, tapping at the windows like fingers. I should have turned around. Every instinct screamed at me to go. But I didn't. I kept going until the trees opened up suddenly into a clearing. And there it was. Flat gravel pads spaced evenly like teeth in a jaw, electrical hookups intact, picnic tables placed just so, a faded sign leaning against a pine tree, its letters so worn I couldn't read them, but I could feel them, like an impression in my chest. I stepped out of the van and the air changed. Still, heavier than it should have been. The kind of silence that doesn't exist in nature. No birds, no insects, just wind that didn't move anything. I walked. Every sight looked lived in but untouched. A child's toy in the grass, a towel draped over a hook, a camp stove with rust only on one side. The pieces didn't match. The decay wasn't consistent, like the park had been abandoned in pieces. One memory at a time. I reached the back loop and saw a familiar shape. My stomach dropped. It was my bike, the old one I'd lost years ago in Arizona. A black Schwinn with worn handlebars and a crack in the seat. I had assumed someone stole it, or that I'd left it behind, too tired to notice. But here it was, leaning against a tree, exactly as I remembered. I backed away, breath catching in my throat, and turned to leave, but the path wasn't there anymore. Not the one I came in on. Just trees, pressed tight together. No tire tracks, no road, no way out. I ran back to the van, heart racing, and slammed the door shut. Locked everything. Told myself I was dreaming, that I was hallucinating from stress or fumes or maybe something in the food I'd eaten earlier. I sat behind the wheel for hours, but the sun didn't move. It stayed low on the horizon, caught in an endless twilight, shadows stretching but never shifting. That's when the knocking started. Soft at first on the side door, 3 slow taps, then silence. Then again, on the passenger side. I stayed completely still. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. It came a third time, on the back window, knock, knock, knock. I whispered aloud, "No one's here." And the air around me suddenly listened, as if I'd spoken into something very awake. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I must have passed out or blacked out. Because when I woke up, it was morning, bright and cold, and the van was parked somewhere else. I was in a lot I didn't recognize, facing a road with no markings, no signs. I looked around in confusion, blinking in the sun, and when I got out of the driver's seat, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper, plain white. On the inside, a drawing. Crude, hand-sketched. It was the exact park I'd just been in, the layout, the roads, the placement of the trees, and in one of the spots circled in red was a table with 4 chairs and a 5th one drawn just outside the circle, labeled "Yours." I threw the note away, burned it, watched it curl to ash on a rusted fire ring I found nearby. I don't know who drew it, but they weren't wrong. That chair's still waiting for me, and I don't know how many more parks I can pass through before I sit down in it without realizing. I've started hearing voices on the radio, not songs, not stations, just fragments. Snatches of conversation that don't belong to anyone I know, whispered sentences in a language I almost understand, but not quite. Sometimes it's my name, drawn out slowly. Sometimes it's laughter, but wrong. Like someone remembering how it sounds rather than feeling it. It only happens when I'm near one of them. The parks, or what's left of them. It's like the frequency only tunes in once I cross some invisible threshold. Static starts humming. Then something cuts through. Words in a cadence that matches my own heartbeat. They always say the same thing before fading out. You left something behind. At first, I thought it meant my bike, or old gear, or maybe just metaphor, grief, fear, a part of myself I'd buried. But I'm starting to wonder if it's more literal, that there's a piece of me, a real piece, stuck out there somewhere, in the empty picnic spot with my name on it, in the loops of the forgotten parks I never meant to find, like I split in half along the road and only one version kept moving forward, and the other, still parked, still waiting. It's changing me. I don't feel tethered anymore. I forget names, not just of people, but places. Streets I drove down a dozen times now feel unfamiliar. I look at my own reflection and see something slightly out of sync, my smile just a beat too slow, my eyes duller than I remember. The worst part, I don't think I'm scared anymore. I should be, but I feel this strange comfort. like the pull of gravity when you're underwater, too deep to rise, but it feels peaceful to stop swimming. Like the voice on the radio is right. I did leave something behind, and maybe it's time to go back for it. I found myself parked outside another forgotten RV site 2 nights ago. Didn't remember driving there, didn't remember stopping, but there it was. Trees arched overhead, quiet and still. A sign with no name, spots laid out in eerie symmetry, like gravestones. I walked the loop, flashlight trembling in my hand, and halfway around I saw someone standing beside a table, not facing me, just still. Their outline looked wrong, like it hadn't fully formed. I should have run. I should have screamed or backed away or jumped in the van and peeled out of there, gravel flying. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, because I recognized the jacket they were wearing. It was mine, the old one I lost years ago, back when I first hit the road, patched sleeve, faded green corduroy. I'd searched everywhere for it, swore it was gone, but there it was, worn by a figure that didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't belong. I whispered, "Who are you?" And it turned. Slowly. Not like a person, more like something remembering how people moved. And then I saw its face. Or my face. Sort of. But aged, weathered, empty. The version of me that never left, that stayed too long, that sat down in the wrong chair and forgot how to stand back up. It didn't speak, it just lifted one hand and pointed to the table. There were 5 chairs now, and one of them was pulled out, waiting. That's when I ran. Back to the van. Slammed the door, locked it 3 times, didn't look back. I drove until my eyes blurred, until the trees turned to desert, until the stars above me shifted into unfamiliar constellations. But I don't think it matters, because that version of me, he's still out there, still sitting. And sometimes when I wake up in a new place, I swear I see him in the rear view, watching. Not angry, not sad, just patient. Like he knows I'll be back, like he was me once, and I'll be him again. Soon. The last thing keeping me grounded was the journal. It started as a way to document my travels, miles logged, parks visited, gear that worked and didn't. But over time, it became something else. A record of feelings I didn't want to admit out loud. Fears I couldn't speak to anyone about. I'd write by lantern light, hunched over the little table in my van, the hum of the forest pressing against the windows. But lately, when I open it, I find entries I don't remember writing. Pages in my own handwriting, dated correctly, placed where they should be, but with words I'd never say. Stories of nights I don't recall. Encounters with people I've never met, details so vivid they crawl under my skin. One entry chilled me so completely I had to stop reading midway through. It described a morning, sunlight filtering through pine branches, dew still on the van windows, a smell of smoke, and then I stepped out of the RV and saw myself, hung from a tree, swollen, gray, eyes open. The entry ended with, "But I'm still here, aren't I?" I tore it out, burned it, but the next day it was back, taped to the wall near my bed, the edges charred, the words darker, like it had wanted to be read. I tried to leave that day. I packed everything, didn't care where I was going, just away. I didn't stop for gas, didn't stop to sleep, but no matter where I drove, the scenery stayed the same. Same tree lines, same curve in the road, same billboard for a family RV retreat that looked older every time I passed it, until the final time when it was just a rusted frame. That's when it hit me. I hadn't been on a road at all, not a real one. I was stuck in a loop, a memory, a story that wasn't entirely mine anymore. The RV parks had bled into each other. They weren't locations on a map. They were echoes. They were states of mind, emotional sinkholes, grief traps. I think they were built on more than just land. I think they were built on the stories people brought with them, the pain they tried to leave behind, the lives they abandoned. And every time someone new camps there, they feed it a little more. Add another thread to the fabric, another whisper in the static. I don't know how to get out. But I think I understand now why I stayed so long. Because when you're grieving, when you're lost, these places feel like home. Quiet, empty, still. They don't ask you to explain yourself. They just absorb you like moss on a fallen log, like rot. I've started hearing scratching inside the cabinets, not animals. It comes in patterns, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, like code. Last night, I opened one. Inside was a folded brochure. Now leasing, Whispering Pines RV Park. There's no address, no phone number, just an image of a happy family seated at a picnic table, and in the background, barely visible, is a fifth person. Faded, like they weren't meant to be in the picture, but they're staring directly at the camera and wearing my jacket. That was the moment I realized the story isn't just mine, it's theirs too. The ones who stayed, the ones who sat down when they shouldn't have, the ones who waited too long to leave. They're trying to tell me something, warn me, or maybe welcome me. I don't anymore, which is worse. I think the radio is lying to me. I turned it off days ago, but sometimes it turns back on. Not with a switch, not with a spark, just on. Static, always. Then the faint melody of something I half recognize, like a lullaby my mother might have hummed when I was young, but slower, wrong. Sometimes it mimics voices I know, old friends, my father, even my own. Last night it said something I can't shake. You can stop running, you're already here. And it was my voice, identical. Same tone, same tired breath behind the words. I checked the dial, no station, just dead air. But the voice kept playing. Even after I pulled the battery. It's not just the radio anymore. Mirrors have started behaving strangely. The one in my RV's tiny bathroom has a crack down the middle now. Not from impact. It just appeared, perfectly straight, as if something inside tried to divide the image and couldn't. When I look into it, my reflection doesn't move quite right. A second behind. The left eye twitches when the right one should, and once, I swear to God, it smiled when I didn't. I haven't looked in it since, because I'm starting to believe the mirror isn't showing now. It's showing after I give in. After I sit down in one of those empty picnic tables and stop driving, after I forget my name, forget the road, forget the world outside, this strange purgatory of abandoned parks and slow, rotten, static voices. That's the pull of these places. They don't demand, they wait, they learn your rhythm, your grief. They cradle you in silence and let your own fear eat you from the inside out. I drove west to try and find the sun again. Chased it into the high desert, hoping the light would burn this fog from my mind. But even there, I found one. Another RV park, unnamed, half buried in red sand. The outlines of lots still visible like bones beneath the dust. A rusted swing set leaning sideways, a half-buried cooler, a lone lantern upright, unlit, no wind, no birds, no life. But in the distance, I saw someone walking between the pads, limping, pale, and they looked up, right at me. No surprise, no fear, just recognition. I turned the van around and drove without blinking for hours. But the worst part, when I checked the back window, there was no one there. No desert, just tall pine trees again. Back in the woods, back where it started, like the desert never happened. Like it was all a dream stitched onto someone else's memory. My compass is broken, not shattered, not stuck, just spinning. Slowly, endlessly. Like it doesn't know what direction is anymore. Like nowhere is safe, nowhere is forward. Every place I go folds back in on itself, familiar in all the wrong ways. I'm running out of fuel, running out of time. But I keep writing, because if someone finds this, if you find this, know this. There's a line you cross when you stay too long in silence, when you start to prefer the quiet over the chaos, when the emptiness begins to feel like peace. That's not peace. That's surrender. That's how they get you. The ones who never left. The ones sitting still in the faded chairs, watching, waiting, because they know eventually you'll want to sit too. I found a trail behind the last park, not on any map. Overgrown, barely a path, just a suggestion in the dirt, like someone had walked it once and never came back. I should have ignored it, but something about it felt like a thread I needed to pull. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe I thought there'd be something at the end. Another road, another exit, a way to finally wake up from this cycle. I grabbed my flashlight and followed it. The trees closed in quickly. Tall, thin pines swaying without wind. Everything felt too still. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, like the ground was swallowing the sound. I walked for what felt like an hour. No animals, no bugs, No birds, just the sound of branches creaking like ribs shifting in their sleep. Then I saw it. Another RV, half hidden behind a curtain of moss. It was old, real old, 60s maybe. Airstream, dulled and dented, tires sunk into the dirt like they'd grown there. One window cracked, the rest fogged over with mildew and time. Against every instinct, I stepped closer. There was something about it, a feeling I couldn't name, like nostalgia but twisted, like walking into a dream you're sure you've had before, but something's always off. The door was slightly open, just enough for a whisper of rot to escape. Inside, everything was still, stale, dust on every surface like skin waiting to be disturbed. A table set for one, a journal lying open, pen beside it. I reached out, hand trembling, and turned a page. My own handwriting. Not similar. Mine. Pages filled with entries I never wrote, describing parks I hadn't yet visited, people I hadn't yet met, ending with dates days from now. And then, underlined in black ink, don't follow the sound. It's not heard it. A voice, just outside the RV, calling my name, soft, cracked, familiar. It sounded like my mother. She's been gone for years. But the voice, it was exact. The lilt, the warmth, the way she used to call me in from the yard when dinner was ready. I froze. She called again. Come outside, sweetheart. I've been waiting. I moved toward the door, then remembered the line in the journal. Don't follow the sound. I stayed still, held my breath. The voice grew sharp, impatient. Not angry, just wrong. You always make me wait. Just come out. I miss you. And then silence. I shut the journal and backed away from the door, heart racing. I don't know how long I stayed there. Hours, maybe. Staring at the floor, trying to stop the shaking in my hands, trying to pretend I hadn't nearly answered something that wasn't real. Eventually I left. Backtracked to my van. When I got there, something was different. The tires were clean, the windshield wiped spotless. Inside, everything had been rearranged, just slightly. The bed was made, but I hadn't made it. The photo of my dad, usually taped above the sink, was gone. In its place was another photo, of me, sitting at that table in the old RV, staring at the journal, same shirt, same cut on my hand from earlier that day, same tired eyes. But I don't remember it being taken. Didn't hear a shudder, didn't see a flash, and I was alone. I know I was alone, unless I wasn't, unless I never really left that place at all, unless none of this is happening in the order I think it is. Maybe these parks, maybe they're not haunted by people. Maybe they're haunted by moments, echoes of pain, repetition, the weight of regret playing on loop. I'm scared to sleep tonight. I feel like something's watching me from the trees, and worse, I feel like it's learning how to be me. I tried burning the photo, I took it outside, lit a match, and watched the edges curl, blacken, vanish into ash. For a second, I felt relief, like I'd taken back a piece of myself. But when I got back inside the van, the photo was sitting on my bed again, unburned. Same angle, same expression, same timestamp written on the back in ink I don't remember using. It's messing with time, with memory. I don't think these places trap you in the traditional sense. I think they erase the parts of you that would have left. I've stopped trusting mirrors, and now I don't trust the camera on my phone either. Last night I recorded myself just to make sure I was still me. Just a short video. I sat down, said my name, the date, the town I was in when this started. Then I played it back. Only I didn't say any of those things. On the screen I looked the same, but the voice wasn't mine. It was softer, slower. The words wrong. I'm home now. I've been home. That's all it said, over and over. I didn't film that. But there I was, lips moving in perfect sync, like I had said it and just couldn't remember. Or like something else is wearing me. I haven't driven in 2 days. I don't remember why I stopped. I only noticed because the gas needle hasn't moved, no tire tracks in the dirt, but the trees outside keep changing. One night it's birch, the next pine. Then Joshua trees, like I'm in the desert again. No transition? Just a different place out the window, as if someone painted a new backdrop. And the sky, God, the sky, it doesn't follow any schedule. Sometimes it goes from dusk to night in seconds. Sometimes the sun just stalls, stuck in place like someone forgot to wind the clock. What scares me more than anything is I'm starting to get used to it. I woke up today and didn't check the date. Didn't care. I looked out the window at whatever forest or field or purgatory was out there and didn't feel panic. I felt tired. And that's the final trick, isn't it? It doesn't have to kill you, it just has to wear you down, so that when the whispers start again, when the door creaks open and the static spills in, you don't run, you listen, because it sounds like someone who once loved you, because you're lonely, because maybe this time it's real. That's the crack where it gets in, not through fear, through longing. I found a necklace today in the drawer next to the stove, a simple silver chain with a turquoise stone. I've never owned it. I don't know who it belonged to, but I picked it up and something inside me remembered it. My chest tightened. I saw flashes like old home videos warped by heat, a woman's hand placing it on me, her face out of frame. A road trip, maybe. A goodbye. A goodbye. Except none of it is mine. I don't know this woman. But the memory felt real, lived in. So now I don't know what's worse, that this place is filling my head with fabricated memories, or that I'm starting to prefer them. I started wearing the necklace. I don't know why. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the comfort of pretending I had a past that made sense, a thread to hold on to. But the second it touched my skin, something shifted. Not outside, inside me. I remembered a song I didn't know I knew. The melody hummed itself at the back of my throat, notes lingering like a lullaby from someone I've never met. And suddenly I felt watched. Not in the way I had before, with fear, suspicion, but with familiarity, as if the thing watching me knew me, like it had waited years for me to come back. The mirror confirmed it. I looked different, just slightly. A tilt in the jawline, eyes a shade darker. It was still my face, but off. Like someone had redrawn me from memory and missed the smallest lines. I stared at that version of myself until my nose started to bleed. It didn't drip, it flowed. Thick and sudden, soaking the front of my shirt in seconds. I panicked, tore the necklace off, and the bleeding stopped. Just like that. No wound, no pain, just a kind of humming under my skin like static trying to hold on. I threw the necklace into the woods, but now it's back. It was on the table this morning. Same position, same glint in the morning light. The thing is, there's no way it could have gotten in. My RV was locked, curtains drawn. I even shoved furniture in front of the door last night. But I woke up and it was just there. And next to it, a Polaroid of me, smiling, wearing the necklace, in front of an RV park I haven't seen yet. I flipped the photo over. No caption, just a hand-drawn map, not detailed. Just a few lines, a turnoff, and a circle scratched in hard with a red pen. I don't know why I'm considering it. I shouldn't go. I should throw the map in the fire, rip up the photo, bury the necklace in cement. But something about that red circle on the map feels inevitable. Like I've already been there. Like this is the last place I have to see. Because the way things are unraveling, there's not much left of me to hold together. It's not just the places anymore. It's me. I talk out loud and forget what I'm saying halfway through. I find messages on the walls in my own handwriting. Don't trust the sky. The clocks lie. Don't answer when she knocks. And always, always, those two words, you're home. Like a mantra, a claim. I think these parks aren't abandoned. I think they're full, but not with people. With selves. Old versions of who we used to be. Trapped in loops, still trying to finish their last trip, still trying to find a road that leads out. And maybe that's the truth, that none of us ever leave these places. We just scatter, bit by bit. A photo left behind here. A smell, a laugh, a scream embedded in the walls, until all that's left of you is something someone else stumbles on. A shape in the window, a song on the wind, a whisper behind a locked door. I'm going to the place on the map. I don't know what I'm hoping to find. Answers? A way out? Maybe I just need to see how it ends. Because the strange thing is, I'm not sure I want to leave anymore. I've started to forget what leaving even means. I pass signs on the road that repeat themselves, same faded lettering, same mileage, like I'm driving in a circle I can't see. One morning I saw a younger version of my van parked off the shoulder. Same color, same dent in the fender. Curtains drawn, quiet. I didn't stop. I couldn't, because I think I was inside, or a version of me, from before I ever came here. And if I'd knocked, if I'd made eye contact, I don't know which one of us would have vanished. I think I'm peeling away from the timeline, like I stepped out of sequence and now I'm floating alongside everything else that never resolved. I used to think the scariest thing was being lost. Now I think the scariest thing is realizing you never really existed in one place at all. You were always a little fragmented, a little off-center, just waiting for a place like this to reflect you back in broken pieces. I'm getting close now. The road is narrowing, trees pressing in like they're trying to hold me still, like they remember me. The air smells like rust and salt, like old tears. And ahead, through the clearing, I see the final park, one long row of RVs, all identical, all silent, all with my license plate. I didn't park. I didn't slow down. I just coasted through the entrance like I was passing into a memory I didn't agree to remember. Every RV in that row was mine. Same dents, same faded bumper stickers from places I'd never visited. Some had their doors open. Others had curtains drawn, just like mine had been for nights now. And every single one, had something scrawled on the inside of the windshield, not in marker, in blood. Or something that had turned brown and cracked the same way. One word, over and over. Stay. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea, a warning, or both. I stopped in front of the last RV. It was newer than the others, cleaner, untouched, but I knew it was mine because the door was already open, swinging gently, waiting, and the necklace, the one I'd thrown away, was hanging from the rearview mirror. I stepped inside. It was like stepping into the eye of a storm, perfectly still, no wind, no sounds, just silence so dense it rang in my ears. It smelled like my mother's perfume, like home, like the way a childhood bedroom smells when you open it years later and everything rushes back at once. I touched the counter and it felt warm, alive. There were photos on the walls, photos of me, but not just me alone, me with people I've never met, me laughing beside a fire, me hugging a man I don't recognize, me holding a child, none of it real, not to me. But the thing is, I wanted it to be. God, I wanted it more than anything. I sat on the bed and felt like I could melt into it. Let the story end here. Let this place rewrite who I was, stitch me into the version I saw on the walls. No more doubt, no more fear, just peace. And that's when I heard her voice again, soft, familiar, from just outside the van, calling my name. The same voice from the cassette, the one that had been whispering "you're home" since the very first park. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a demon. It was me, another version of me, standing outside the RV, watching me through the window, smiling that slow, tired smile. She didn't speak again. She just watched. And I understood. She was the one who stayed, the one who gave in. Let the story finish itself without question, without fight. She was offering me the same deal, but I couldn't do it, because if I stayed, I wouldn't remember I'd stayed. That was the price. Peace in exchange for self. So I stood up. I walked out. And when I did, the others came into view. All the other versions of me, lined up down the path, standing beside their RVs, watching silently. Some looked broken, some looked blank, some looked so tired it made my chest ache. But I didn't stop. I walked past them, step by step, out of the park, down the road through the trees, until the last whisper faded behind me like fog burning off in sunlight. I don't know how long I walked, but eventually the air changed. It smelled sharp again, real. I saw a highway. I saw people. And for the first time in what felt like months, I saw the sky hold a shape that didn't shift. Blue, open, vast. I haven't gone back to the van. I left it there. Maybe someone else will find it. Maybe they'll hear the whispers too. Maybe the park will rebuild itself around them like it did for me. But I'm done running in circles. I don't need to understand everything. I just need to keep moving. Because if there's one thing I know now, one thing this whole nightmare taught me, it's that memory is a living thing. And if you don't fight for it, if you don't claim it every single day, something else will. Something that smiles like you. Something that calls like home, but never lets you leave. So I keep walking with no map, no van, just one rule. If a place tells you you're home before you even ask, walk the other way. Because real home, it doesn't whisper for you to stay. It lets you go and hopes you'll come back, only when you're ready. I used to believe that national parks were the safest places you could take a Volkswagen camper. Well-traveled trails, regulated campgrounds, maps at every turn. It was supposed to be peace and pine trees, a place to forget your past for a while, let your soul stretch out in the fresh air. But peace can be deceiving. Stillness can hide things, and once you see what's behind the curtain, once you hear the silence whisper your name, you never drive through the woods the same way again. I was 34 when I took the trip that changed me. Solo. That wasn't unusual. I'd been doing solo Volkswagen camping for years. There's something about the self-reliance of it, the quiet. You roll into a place on your own terms, park where you please, brew coffee as the sun rises, and if you're lucky, not speak to another soul for days. That solitude was my therapy. It was late September, that time of year where the air has just enough bite to keep the crowds away, but not so cold that you need to keep the heater on all night. I'd been driving west from Colorado through the string of national parks that line the spine of Utah. Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef. I'd hit Bryce next, but it wasn't any of those that did it. It was a smaller, less trafficked stretch of protected land near Escalante. Technically part of Grand Staircase Escalante, but not the main tourist routes. This was backcountry, the place's maps warn you not to go alone. But I'd raid forums, talked to other van lifers. They said the solitude there was unmatched, a hidden gem. One guy swore he stayed 3 nights without seeing another soul. That sold me. I figured I'd stock up on supplies in town, top off the gas, and give myself 2 nights off-grid. Just the Volkswagen, a few good books, and the stars. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. That wasn't weird for me. I didn't have family who checked in often, and I liked it that way. Freedom. No one worrying, no one expecting updates. Just me and the road. I got to the trailhead around 4 p.m. The sun was slanting low over the red rock. I parked the van under a line of gnarled punyan pines and walked about a half-mile in, just to get a feel. It was silent, like a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, too still. The kind where you can hear your own blood moving behind your ears. There were no other campers, no recent tire tracks in the dirt, nothing but a shattered picnic table and an old trail sign so bleached by the sun you could barely read it. It said, Coyote Gulch Overlook 3.4 mi. And underneath that, someone had scratched into the wood with a knife. Stay back! I chalked it up to kids. Graffiti happens. But there was something in the way the words were carved, deep and frenzied, like whoever did it wasn't trying to be funny. I slept in the van that first night, tucked beneath the trees, windows cracked just slightly. I remember that detail because I'd always loved sleeping with a faint scent of juniper drifting in. It grounded me. But around 1 a.m., I woke up drenched in sweat. The temperature had dropped to the low 40s, and yet my shirt clung to my back like I'd been running. I couldn't place what had startled me awake. No noise, no light, just the feeling that I wasn't alone. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling of my camper, heart pounding hard enough I could feel it in my teeth. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, like footsteps, not fast, not heavy, just cautious. Soft shifts of gravel outside the van, moving from the rear bumper to the side window, pausing every few feet. I held my breath. My keys were in the ignition, but I didn't dare move. I told myself it was probably a deer, maybe a coyote sniffing around. But there was no sniffing. No panting, no four-legged rustle. Whatever it was standing upright. I stayed frozen, eyes locked on the side window, but I didn't dare lift the curtain. I just stared at the silhouette. It stood there for almost 10 minutes. Not moving, just watching or listening. I could hear the occasional tap, light and rhythmic, like nails brushing against the metal just beneath the window. Then, without warning, the sound stopped, not like it wandered off, more like it vanished. 1 second it was there, The next, gone. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat up in the van with a flashlight in one hand and a small hatchet in the other, just in case. When the sun finally rose, I opened the door and stepped outside, heart still hammering. There were no tracks, no broken twigs, no sign of an animal or a person. But right beneath the window where I'd heard the tapping, I found something. A long, thin feather, gray and black, oily to the touch, and curled at the end like it had been burned. Now, I'm not superstitious, not usually. I don't believe in monsters. But that feather, it felt wrong. It felt like it didn't belong, like it wasn't dropped, but left. I almost packed up and left right then, but something in me, a mix of ego and curiosity, decided to stay. I told myself I was being paranoid, that sleep deprivation could make anything seem eerie. So I locked the van, stuffed the feather into my pack, I don't even know why I kept it, and headed toward the Overlook Trail. Coyote Gulch was supposed to be breathtaking, but I never made it that far. The trail wound through narrow sandstone canyons that sharp turns where the red rock loomed high on both sides. At first, the air was warm, almost comforting, but an hour in, the temperature dropped fast, not like natural shade. It felt sudden, manufactured, the kind of cold that settles in your bones and makes you forget what warmth ever felt like. Then I started noticing the markers, small stacks of rocks off the main path. At first, I thought they were just trail cairns, hikers marking their way, but they weren't placed logically. Some were in impossible spots, on sheer ledges, in narrow cracks too thin for a human hand to reach. Others were wrong. Not natural stacks, but twisted, leaning towers, like fingers trying to climb out of the earth. I was about to turn around when I saw the first one, a backpack. Old, sun-bleached, half buried in dust. And next to it, a boot. Still laced, still upright, but filled with sand and something else, something I didn't look at closely. I told myself it was an abandoned pack. Maybe someone got spooked and left in a hurry. But my gut told me different. There was no rust on the zippers, no animal damage, it wasn't weathered, it looked recent. And it was only then, after hours on foot, that I realized something deeply unsettling. There were no other footprints but mine. Not on the trail, not near the pack, not near the boot. No one had walked this trail in days, maybe longer, but someone or something had been out here last night. I'd heard it, felt it, and now I wasn't sure if I was being watched again. I turned back, fast, but not fast enough to look like I was panicking, because somewhere deep in my mind, some primal instinct told me not to run. Not yet. Like whatever might be watching was still deciding something, watching not just where I stepped, but how. I didn't take the exact same route back. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just followed the sun, the ridgelines, what I remembered. But about 20 minutes into that retreat, I noticed something that made my stomach knot. Another backpack. Not the same one. Different color, different size. This one was torn like it had been grabbed or yanked from someone's shoulders. And sitting on top of it, almost deliberately placed, was a faded photo. A man and a woman. Maybe early 40s. Arm in arm. Smiling in front of a forested lake. On the back, written in smudged ink, Fall 96 finally made it to Utah. It wasn't a recent photo, but the backpack, like the first one, it hadn't been out there for long. Not with the lack of sun damage, not with the zipper still shining in the shadows, and that's when I realized none of this was part of a trail. I wasn't just off the beaten path. I was somewhere people weren't supposed to find or come back from. I tightened the straps of my own pack and moved with more urgency. The stillness was getting worse. The air didn't just feel cold anymore. It felt stale, like the oxygen was thinning, like I was breathing something old, decayed. At some point, I stopped hearing birds. I hadn't noticed it happen gradually. They were just gone. No rustling in the brush, no distant caws, only the sound of my boots crunching over gravel and the rasp of my own breath. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, metallic and sweet, like overripe fruit left in a hot car. But it deepened the closer I got to a bend in the trail, where the canyon narrowed into a shaded slot. My skin crawled. I should have turned around again, But my curiosity, my need for answers, was louder than my fear. That smell, it wasn't fruit. It was blood. The air was thick with it, coppery and raw. I crept forward, keeping close to the canyon wall, hand on the hatchet in my side pocket, and that's when I saw it. A campsite. Old, but still intact. A faded dome tent half collapsed in the sand, its rainfly flapping lightly in the breeze that shouldn't have reached this deep into the canyon. A camp stove, rusted shut. A wool blanket spread flat like someone had just stood up from it. But no people. No bodies. Just the smell and the silence. I moved slowly, listening for anything. Breathing, footsteps, movement, nothing. Then I reached the tent and unzipped the flap. Inside, I found a journal, mildewed, water-warped, but still readable in places. I flipped through it, hands shaking. The entries were dated from June 2004. A man named Derek traveling with his girlfriend, Jenna. They'd been hiking through Escalante, camping along lesser-known trails. The tone started casual, even excited, but the last few entries, they were different. Heard the knocking again last night. Same time, 2:13 a.m. No animals, nothing outside, just 3 taps, then silence. Jenna says she saw someone crouched behind the rocks watching the tent, says they had no face, just skin where the face should be. Tried to hike out this morning, but the trail looped, ended up back here, same boulder, same cairns, Jenna's crying. Says something's wrong with the sun. Last night she vanished for 3 hours. When she came back, her eyes were bleeding, but she said nothing happened. The final entry wasn't written, it was scrawled across 2 full pages. It's not the land that traps you, it's the memory of you here. I dropped the journal. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in on itself. I stood backpedaling from the tent, looking up at the canyon walls, half expecting them to close in on me. That was when I heard it again. The footsteps. Same rhythm, same pacing. Careful, deliberate. Crunching over the sand behind me, just around the canyon curve. My vision blurred for a second from adrenaline. I crouched behind a rock outcrop, holding my breath, every muscle locked, and then I saw them. Feet. Bare. Pale. Walking just past the tent. No shoes. No gear. Just a pair of legs and feet, dragging slightly on the left side like the person was injured or didn't know how to walk right. I didn't look higher than the knees. I couldn't. Something in me screamed not to. That if I saw the face, if there was one, I'd lose something in myself I wouldn't get back. They passed, never broke stride, never looked toward me, just kept going deeper into the canyon, moving in that same strange cadence. When I couldn't hear the steps anymore, I ran. I ran until my lungs screamed and my knees buckled. I fell more than once, skinned my hand on a sharp rock and didn't even feel it. I just kept moving, desperate to find a familiar marker, a trail, the van, anything. Hours passed. Just the sun started dipping again. My mind spiraled. Was this what Derek meant? About memory? Was I being looped back into the same pocket of land, like time itself was warped here? Had I stepped into something I didn't understand? Eventually, I crested a ridge and saw it. My van. Just sitting there, quiet and untouched, in the exact spot I'd parked it the night before. I didn't celebrate, didn't run. I approached it like it was a sleeping animal. Slowly, carefully. I checked every window before I opened the door. I half expected to see someone sitting in the driver's seat, but it was empty. Everything inside was exactly as I left it, except for one thing. The feather. It was gone. And in its place, on the dash, was the photograph. The same one I'd found on the second backpack, the couple smiling by the lake. Only now, they weren't smiling. Their eyes were gone, scratched out with deep, ragged marks, and behind them, almost invisible unless you squinted, was a figure. Tall, shadowed, no face, arms too long for a person. I started the van without hesitation, threw it into reverse, and nearly tore up the trees getting back to the main road. I didn't stop driving until I hit the first gas station 2 towns over, where I parked under a light and sat shaking behind the wheel until sunrise. And even then, I didn't feel safe. I slept in the gas station parking lot that night. Didn't even try to make it to a hotel. Just kept the van locked, engine off, seat reclined enough so I could fake sleep between jolts of paranoia. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph. The faces. The thing behind them. Its limbs too long, body wrong, like it didn't belong to this world, like it wasn't supposed to be captured, but was anyway. By dawn, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Eyes bloodshot, beard patchy with dried sweat, mouth dry as gravel. But I didn't care about hygiene or sleep. I just needed answers. I needed to know what I had seen. Because whatever that place was, it wasn't right. And I couldn't shake the feeling it had let me go. I started digging. It began small, articles about disappearances in Escalante. Then deeper, park forums, survival blogs, decades-old missing persons databases. At first, it all seemed like tragic coincidence, hikers going off trail, weather events, old-fashioned bad luck. But there were patterns. People who vanished often had one thing in common. They weren't on official trails. They were chasing something unmarked, a detour, a shortcut, a hunch. And the language in the recovered journals, voice notes, final messages, it was eerily similar. Looping trails, changes in sunlight, knocking at night, missing time, people coming back wrong. There was one case I couldn't get out of my head. A ranger named Sylvia Hensley, mid-30s, experienced, local to the area, went missing during a solo recon in 2001. Supposed to be a 2-day route, never came back. When they found her radio, it was at the bottom of a dry wash with the battery still charged, mic open. Last thing she transmitted was a whisper. Not alone, not one of us. Then static. I found her name in a private Reddit thread. A former search and rescue volunteer claimed Sylvia was last seen heading toward a place called Spirit Arch, not any modern map, not marked on any trail guides, but an older hiker replied with a scanned topo map from the 1970s. Sure enough, there it was. Spirit Arch. Tiny. Nearly invisible. About 15 miles from where I found the second backpack. That did it. I had to go back. I know what you're thinking. Why? Why would I risk it? But once you see something like that, feel it inside your bones, you can't just move on. It clings to you, follows you in silence. And I had this sick certainty, if I didn't face it again, it would find a way back to me. So I prepped. This time I didn't go alone. I called an old friend, Kyle, former Marine, skilled tracker, no stranger to desert terrain. I didn't tell him everything, just that I'd found something strange out in Escalante, maybe connected to missing persons, maybe nothing. I needed a second set of eyes. He hesitated, but came. We drove out in separate vans, parked in the same turnout where I'd originally camped. Daylight was high, skies clear. I almost laughed at how peaceful it looked, like it was mocking me. We packed light, water, comms, GPS, weapons. Kyle had a GoPro rig he mounted to his chest. I brought a satellite phone, just in case. And before we stepped off the trail, I made one final decision. I left a note in my glove box. If we didn't come back in 48 hours, whoever found the van would find names, dates, coordinates, and the phrase I had seen scrawled in Derek's journal. It's not the land that traps you, it's the memory of you here. It took most of the day to hike to where I thought I'd found the tent. And strange thing was, I couldn't find it again. The canyon was there, the ridgeline, the turns in the trail, but the tent, gone, like it had never existed. Kyle started asking questions. You sure this is the right spot? Positive this wasn't heat stroke? I didn't blame him. The landscape messes with your head. Heat rises from the rock in waves, turning shadows into shapes. But then we found it. Not the tent, not the backpacks, the arch. Spirit Arch, half collapsed now. Barely a notch in the canyon wall, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. Carved from wind and time, framed against the sun like some doorway into nowhere. That's when the air changed again. Same feeling as before, too quiet, too still, and that metallic tang returned, faint but present. The hairs on my neck lifted. Kyle noticed it too. He pulled his radio from his belt and clicked it on. You hear that? He whispered. I listened. At first, nothing. Then, knock, knock, knock. Far off, echoing against the canyon walls, too rhythmic to be rockfall, too hollow to be natural. Kyle looked at me with hard eyes. That wasn't wind. We pressed forward, slower now, hyper-aware of every sound, every shift in the air, and then I saw them. Cairns, 3 of them, perfectly stacked, balanced just so. One was fresh, stones still damp underneath. The second had a small ribbon wrapped around the top, faded plaid. The third had teeth embedded in it. Not animal, human. Kyle leaned in, staring at the teeth without touching them. "Someone placed this," he muttered. "This wasn't scavenged." I wanted to turn back. I should have. But something drew me forward, some awful gravity. And that's when it happened. The light shifted, not like a passing cloud, not like sunset. The color changed. Everything dimmed to this copper tone. Not red, not orange. Just wrong. The shadows grew too long for the time of day. Our skin looked sallow in it. My breath shortened. Then the canyon echoed again. Louder. Knock, knock. Only this time it was closer. We turned fast, scanning the ridge. Nothing. Then Kyle shouted, "There!" A figure, cresting the far end of the ridge, silhouetted by the crooked sun. Same as I'd seen before, tall, wrong proportions, but now I could see the way it moved. Not fluid, not clumsy, just unnatural. It stepped, paused, tilted, as if listening. Kyle raised his rifle. "Say the word." I didn't, because I couldn't. My voice was gone, frozen in my throat like ice. Every part of my body screamed, "Run," but I stood still, transfixed. And then, just like that, the figure turned and vanished behind the rocks. Gone, like mist under sunlight. We didn't chase it. We turned and got the hell out of there. No hesitation, no second guesses. But as we ran, the knocking didn't stop. It just followed, echoing, mocking. We ran for what felt like hours, but it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. The terrain was too jagged, the footing too loose, and every time we thought we'd cleared the ridge, the path ahead changed, split, bent, or curved back toward where we'd just been. Kyle cursed under his breath, trying to get a GPS signal. I kept looking over my shoulder, but the figure never reappeared. Only the sound followed. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3, always spaced the same way, like a code. The GoPro on Kyle's chest caught it all. His footage later showed the arch, the cairns, the weird discoloration of the sky. But the most chilling part, the knocking wasn't on the audio. It had been in our ears only. Internal. After nearly losing our way twice, we finally made it back to the van. I collapsed into the driver's seat, hands shaking, and Kyle stood outside, staring down the trail like he half expected the thing to follow us into daylight. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Eventually he said, "That wasn't human." And I believed him. But belief doesn't mean peace. I thought leaving would give me closure. That driving home would create some emotional border between what I'd seen and who I was before I saw it. But it didn't. The knocking followed me. Not literally, no, but in dreams, in silence, in every hollow sound that echoed too long, and the more I looked, the worse it got. That arch, not unique. Spirit Arch was a name, but it was also a pattern, a formation that repeats in different parks. Arches, Zion, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, different names, but the same geometry. Narrow gaps, worn stone, ancient trails, always near reports of vanishings, and always accompanied by strange behavior from animals. I found a wildlife report from 1999 about deer circling a collapsed arch in Bryce Canyon until they dropped from exhaustion. Another report said mountain lions refused to enter a certain slot canyon even when chased into it. And whatever's out there, it's not tied to one location. It's tied to the shape, to the idea of a threshold. And that changed everything for me. Because I wasn't just dealing with one encounter anymore. I'd walked through something I didn't understand, and it had marked me. A few weeks after we got back, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name and the coordinates I had written in the glove box, down to the decimal. Inside the envelope was a single photo, grainy, faded, like it had been printed from a film reel decades ago. It showed 4 people standing in front of what looked like Spirit Arch, but newer, cleaner. Before it collapsed, early 80s maybe. One woman had a ranger badge. I recognized her from the missing persons thread, Sylvia Hensley. They were all smiling, but the longer I stared, the more I saw. Behind them, in the shadow of the arch, barely visible, was the outline of something tall, watching, its head too narrow. One arm stretched against the rock like it was holding itself back. Written on the back of the photo were 6 words: "It doesn't forget the curious ones." I burned it that night. Every part of me knew it was a mistake to keep it. But it didn't matter. The dreams intensified. Not nightmares exactly, more like places I'd never seen but recognized. Caves that dripped upward, campsites with no exits, the sound of boots walking in patterns behind me, and always, always, knock, knock. I started isolating, pushed people away. I stopped camping for a long time. I let the van sit in storage. A part of me wanted to pretend the whole thing had been an episode. Stress, paranoia, trauma. But I couldn't lie to myself that hard, not after everything I'd seen. Kyle stopped answering my calls. Last time we spoke, he said, "It's starting to bleed into the day now. I see things out of the corner of my eye. My dog won't go near my gear." Then he hung up. I haven't heard from him since. I tracked down his sister last month. She said he'd gone off-grid. Took his camper and disappeared into the Arizona desert. Left a note that said, "Going quiet, don't follow." And now I think I understand why. You can't talk about this stuff without pulling it closer. You can't share it without it hearing you. I debated even recording this, telling you this story. But it's not about me anymore. It's about everyone who camps alone. Everyone who trusts the silence a little too much. Because these places, they remember. They remember who comes with questions, who pushes past the signs, who hears the knocking and keeps walking anyway. And they don't always let you go. That's the hardest truth I've learned. You can't map what's ancient. You can't catalog what doesn't want to be known. And you sure as hell can't beat it with logic. What lives between those canyons, in those arches, through those forests, it's older than we are. It doesn't need to chase. It waits. Because eventually someone curious enough will come knocking back. It's been a year since I left the van parked for good. A year since I stopped trailblazing, stopped chasing ghost stories through the desert. But if I'm being honest with myself, that wasn't the end of the journey. Just the pause, the fear, the dread, the sense of something ancient breathing just beneath the surface of our wild spaces. It didn't disappear when I turned the ignition off. If anything, stepping away gave it more room to grow. Because what we fear doesn't just live out there in the woods or the canyons or the wind-worn arches. Sometimes it moves in with us, quiet, patient. It waits in the stillness between thoughts, in the parts of us we've learned to silence. I started hearing things again a few weeks ago. Not the knocking this time, something else. Whispers. Not voices exactly, more like suggestions, impressions. A tug in the chest. Like some part of the desert had hitched a ride back with me and was waiting for me to notice, to answer. I ignored it at first, but the pull kept growing, and I gave in. I packed light, took only what I needed. A new camera, a notebook, no tech, no GPS. I figured if this thing had followed me, I might as well look it in the eye. I returned to the park, but not through the main gates. I used a service road I'd found on an old map, one so eroded it barely qualified as a trail. The ranger at the entrance had warned me about washouts. I nodded and smiled and drove past like I was just another weekend traveler looking for red rocks and sunset photos. But I wasn't here for that. I followed the road as far as it would take me, then hiked in. No Kyle, no backup. Just me, my boots, and the sound of the wind scraping over the stone. And eventually, I found it again. Spirit Arch, or what remained of it. The collapse had shifted its shape. It was lower now, cracked in two, a wound in the rock. But somehow, it was more intact than before. As if the arch had never been a structure, but a presence, a threshold. I stood in front of it for a long time. I could feel it pulling at something in me. Not in a horror movie kind of way, not a scream in the woods terror, but something deeper, older, like it was inviting me to let go, to stop pretending I ever left. And that's when I realized this wasn't about fear. It was about memory. The memory of this place, the memory of those who came before, the memory of every camper, every explorer, every kid with a backpack who stepped just a little too far off trail and never came back. It wasn't trying to haunt me. It was trying to remind me. We don't own these wild places, we borrow them, and some debts run too deep to ignore. So I sat. I didn't run this time. I sat and listened, and eventually the whispers faded, the air warmed, the desert settled back into silence, and I knew, truly knew, truly knew that I'd been given something most people don't get: a second chance. Not everyone returns from places like this. Not everyone who disappears is taken. Some give themselves over to obsession, to fear, to mystery. But if there's one thing this story taught me, it's this: you can walk through darkness and still find your way back. You can face things older than your fear, deeper than your understanding, and come out not unscarred, but wiser. Because the truth isn't that national parks are dangerous. It's that they're alive. They remember. They test you. They watch how you treat their silence, how you speak their names, whether you follow the signs or go looking where you shouldn't. But if you listen, really listen, they'll show you something sacred. Not in the obvious places, not in the views everyone photographs, but in the quiet corners, in the unsettling moments, in the things you feel before you see. That's where the real story lives. Not in the van, not on the trail, but in you. So if you find yourself out there, on a lonely road, in a quiet canyon, standing before something ancient and still, ask yourself, are you here to conquer or to remember? Because the wild doesn't need more conquerors. It needs more witnesses. More people brave enough to admit they were afraid but didn't turn back. That's the gift this journey gave me. Not closure, not answers, but reverence. A reason to keep going, wiser, quieter, stronger. And if you ever hear something in the woods or feel something watching you from the ridge, don't panic, don't run, but don't ignore it either, because some places aren't meant to be understood, only respected. And if you're lucky, they'll let you leave with your story intact, just like I did, this time.